Chapter 1939. It's indestructible and everlasting. It's called the sky-shocking impasse. Transcending eternity and immortality is called the eternal realm. Abyss said proudly. Abyss said proudly. He was the first to reach this level. And he was definitely the strongest in the eternal universe. After countless years of bitter cultivation, Abyss was the only one who had entered this realm with the greatest talent of all time. Eternal. Ha! Yi Xian took a step forward as a disdainful smile appeared on his face. You're only half a step into the eternal realm. You're still far away from the real eternal realm. Yi Xian always knew that there was a realm above the sky-shocking impasse, which was the so-called transcendence. Yi Xian had to admit that he admired Abyss a lot. It was really unprecedented that he could reach the sky-shocking impasse. Unfortunately, in Yi Xian's opinion, even if Abyss reached the sky-shocking impasse, he was still far away from the real eternal realm. Half-step. This was just a glimpse of the eternal realm. Abyss cultivation was between the sky-shocking impasse and the eternal realm. To put it bluntly, he was still at the sky-shocking impasse. However, at this moment, Abyss was terrifyingly powerful. If Yi Xian was right, Tribulation's heart-piercing attack did not work, because Abyss had reached the sky-shocking impasse. From this, it could be seen that even though Abyss hadn't truly transcended, he was already ahead of everyone else. Desolation, you're right. I'm still far away from the eternal realm. However, no matter how sharp your tongue is, no matter how vicious your schemes are, in front of me, a sky-shocking impasse, you can only become a noisy dog. Boom! Abyss raised his 5 fingers, as if he was lifting the entire eternal universe. The power that surpassed the eternal universe was condensing an unimaginable power. Suppress! Buzz! Something terrible happened. A huge dark abyss appeared and crashed toward Yi Xian and the others. The great power of the sky-shocking impasse made Yi Xian and the others feel extremely heavy. Open! Yi Xian and the other 3 shouted fiercely. They raised their arms and tried to lift up the heaven abyss. However, Yi Xian and the other 3 trembled, because the heaven abyss they were lifting was as heavy as the universe. It was about to crush them alive. Crack! The spines of Yi Xian's group of 4 bent, and they couldn't even straighten their knees. The half-step eternal realm's cultivation was simply unfathomable. It was a kind of power between the eternal realm and the heaven-shaking absolute ground, giving them a terrifying pressure. Strong. Too strong. Even Yi Xian didn't think that the abyss would be so terrifying. Although he was only at the half-step eternal realm, he had already begun to crush the 4 heaven-shaking extremities. For Yi Xian and the other 3, this was simply an unprecedented catastrophe. Never before. However, cultivating to half-step eternal was another no longer there had never been a single person who shattered could suppress the eternal light of the heavens. He still wouldn't be able to truly kill him. Today was truly shocking. The terror of half-step invincible. Time stopped. Abyss King is unstagnated. 2 in the order body was also recovering rapidly. Abyss's power was in a much more eternal light, and their eyes were filled with still used some of his cultivation. Terrifying Abyss for the other incarnation was in a much worse state. Abyss stood proudly in the air, overlooking the world. I've said it before. His eyes were contemptuous, the portal of reincarnation. His voice rumbled in only be below me. No one knew what was happening. But the dark portal of reincarnation no longer had his crackling was incessant. He looked inside the portal of reincarnation, and although he was unwilling to light flickered violently, they were about to kneel under Abyss's suppression. Let's kill heaven and earth lost their color, flew by in eternal firmament, a glaring brilliance. Ancient heaven destroyed Abyss's body and soul. Experts could not open their eyes. Yi Xian, how dare you? Other 3 were all heaven shaped forward. After an unknown period of time, they naturally had their own pride. It was an instant. Even if they were no match for watch eternity, they would never kneel before him. At this moment, you can't kill him. Stagnant sublimated to worst dream. He can they finally opened their eyes and saw the changes in them performed their strong figures waved his hand, shattering the heaven abyss to look at them. They were both half-step eternal experts. The void twisted and shattered. His spider web by him, and the other had all dark from his body because he looked like a broken eternal cave that was about to explode and indestructible. It was not only the suppression of cultivation, he was still in the void, but also the suppression of arts and Tao. Chapter 19 was half a realm higher than his divine soul and body crushed them and was spreading his entire body at an extremely fast speed. Dong dong soul and body. In the next moment, there was an explosion. Every step of his body exploded. If one flesh and blood spread eternal realm exploded, the entire land of nothingness exploded in the void. Fight him. Abyss, at this critical moment, shocking cultivation so much ferocious lord and grief. Desolation was cold and the second time they were ready to fight. Actually been defeated by Eternal isn't over. The difference between heaven and earth to you. Tide saw your lives away the last suddenly transcendent waiting for Tide's cracked body. Yuan was reported by you on Tuesday. Yi took a step forward from the corner as he spoke in a weak voice. At this moment, you wanted to the last word flickered violently. I'm afraid you don't have the ability injured by the Tide's sorrow faintly and ruthlessly. They did not attack you because of the backlash he suffered from. Did he know that the only way was to fight with his life and open the void? Don't worry, the three of them wanted to lead Song around the void with a heavy look in his eyes. The two of them on the shoulders. Without waiting calm Song before turning around, Abyss's flesh and blood started desolation. This instantly caused suddenly Abyss's face to change. Abyss said indifferently, you and two was already high in the next moment. And regards expression as Song blocked their way. They did not expect their eyes to still be alive. Eternal and desolation. Abyss's face was as pale as a sheet. Clapped his hands. There was no trace of blood on his face. I naturally know that I can't powerful aura to cultivate to such a level. Reassembled his body slowly, walking in front of Abyss to preserve his life. And looked down at him with a condescending calm expression. He had almost Abyss's face turned pale, and a heavy flashed in his eyes. He knew Yi Xian wasn't a gentleman. After all, instead he was more like a despicable villain. His methods were vicious and terrifying. Yi Xian looked calm and composed. It was impossible for him to leave just like that. Suddenly, he felt a little uneasy. Yuan could only lower his head. You think you can scare me with your pretentious act? I like smart coldly. Although your pride makes you look no different from a stupid dog, because the uneasiness in his heart your aptitude and cultivation. Are you curious as to why tribulation betrayed you? What are you trying to say? Yi Xian lightly smiled. Although Abyss was arrogant, as if he was chatting about family matters. Yi Xian had stopped him and did not attack him. Clearly, he had other intentions. The reason is simple. Because he is very calmly, and I am him, and went straight to the gave point. A strange smile. I can let you go. What happened in the next moment caused everyone to be stunned on the spot. As long as you do these two things, especially Abyss, I will naturally let you go. His expression became extremely unsightly. Abyss growled angrily, unknowingly. His eyes turned blood-red. Had quietly he could not understand why Yi Xian was always riding on his head. And his master had whatever he wanted into another Yi Xian. Do you think I'm not qualified? His entire body emitted a shocking luster. Yi Xian smiled coldly as he looked at you. I finally waited for this day. Just the two people by your side nodded and smiled at Yi Xian. Right? Welcome back. Besides, you can't even use your cultivation right now. Tribulation. Do you think I have the right to threaten you? Until it turned into a shadow. Yi Xian's words, he walked into Yi Xian's body, and veins popped out on his forehead. His chest was about to explode from anger. Chapter 19. However, he had to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. Happened. He could only compromise. Clang. There was nothing he could do about it. As three unfathomable techniques. Tell me, and what do you want me to do shot for out you? From the top of his Abyss head, said coldly, transforming into three phantoms that condensed above with a kind expression on his face. These were the Dharma and Tao of Yi Xian's walked over to Abyss's side. At that moment, causing you and two to look at each other nervously. The terrifying power that erupted from them made Yi Xian patted Abyss's shoulder affectionately. The Dharma and Tao of the three lifetimes turned into a tricolored light that surged back into Yi Xian's head. Abyss pulled away Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian's body trembled as a terrifying aura. He hated Yi Xian's affectionate attitude. Land erupted. In ancient times, half-step to eternal realm. Yi Xian showed this kind of attitude. Yi Xian's body shook as his black robe fluttered. Abyss had already experienced it. His 3,000 strands of hair fluttered in the wind as terrifying ripples spread out in all directions. Yi Xian's words fell, that inexplicably terrifying aura actually forced the heavens and earth chaotic, to uncontrollably his face turned red, desolate heaven were filled with excitement. Heaven-burying mantra. Yes, how could he forget? Heaven-shocking mantra. Xiao had fallen the Dharma into and Tao of the three lifetimes perhaps were contained in his body. And Abyss could wake her up. Realm to both of them were half-step eternal realm experts. The power of the three lifetimes was unimaginable. They might be able to wake Xiao up. Yuan roared in shock as he stared at Yi Xian. Abyss did not waste any time in agreed, as he sensed a great threat approaching him. He was defeated by Yi Xian, three lifetimes in one, and was threatened by him. Three lifetimes in one. Human world, heartbroken mountain, roared in shock as a dazzling light burst out from his eyes. There were 6 earth-shattering lands of extremis. 3 lifetimes in one. No. He has instead of contained the Dharma and Tao of the 3 lifetimes in his body. There were 7 of them even gathered in one place. He has reached the half-step to eternal realm in an ancient bronze coffin. Together with her existence. All
in
the
the next
shattering
moment,
lands
Yuan
of
roared in
extremists
shock.
from the three
As
great
one of the
eras
strongest
were gathered
people
here.
in the eternal
Except
universe,
for tribulation,
he could see Yi
who was
Xian's
Yi
scheming
Xian's
and
future
mean
self,
self,
glance,
and had merged
from the
with Yi
primordial
Xian.
age to the
Everyone
present.
else
Yuan
represented an
Xian
era.
had been cultivating
Buzz,
the Dharma
the
and
coffin
Tao of the
slowly
three
opened,
lifetimes,
and Shi
it
Yao
was
appeared
terrifying
before
and
everyone's
crazy.
eyes.
In terms of
She
talent,
was still sleeping.
Yuan was definitely
she would
not
never wake
inferior
up
to Yi Xian.
Just like in the past,
naturally,
Shi
Yao's
Yao's thought of
appearance did not
reincarnating
change
at
at
all.
cultivating again.
She even had a smile
However,
on
in
her
the
face
end,
in
he
her
gave
sleep.
up because this
Is
path
this
was too
goddess Shi Yao?
dangerous.
It
Abyss
could be
looked
said
at the
that there
girl
was
in
no
the coffin
chance of
indifferently.
survival.
There was
Yuan
no
never
change
would
in
have
his
thought that Yi
expression.
Xian would
In the
actually
three great
succeed in
eras,
walking this path.
only one woman
Moreover,
had turned into
he'd
a
already
earth-shattering
perfected
land
his
of
cultivation
extremists
for 3
This was
lifetimes.
very rare in Abyss's
Terrifying.
eyes.
Madness.
There's only a
He
trace
was
of
really
her
a
divine
madman.
soul left.
Abyss was
She's
shocked,
just a living
ashamed,
dead
and
now.
resentful.
It's indeed
He believed
difficult
that
to
he was
revive
unprecedented
as a
walking in front of
eternal
everyone.
realm existence.
But only today
Abyss's
did he
vision was
discover
very sharp.
that the one walking
He saw
at
Shi
the very
Yao's
front
situation
was
at a
actually
glance
still Huang,
and made a conclusion.
As a supreme being of the
Desolation, you
eternal
want to save
universe,
her?
Abyss
frowned and
understood Yi
said,
Xian's goal
"Yes,
all too
this
well.
is my promise to
At
her."
this moment,
Taizong has also waited for countless
and
years.
Dao had reached
Yi
perfection,
Xian said in a deep
allowing
voice.
Yi Xian to
However,
become half a step
you must
into the
know that
eternal
she is a
realm.
heaven-shaking extinction ground.
Her divine
long
soul
as he
is
could
different
combine
from
the
that
three
of ordinary
lifetimes
people.
and combine the three
Right
types
now,
of magic
her divine
and
soul
Dao
is
into
shattered,
one,
and only a
he would
sliver
be
is
able to
left.
create the strongest technique of all time.
If you want to reform
which
her
was
divine
also the
soul,
so-called true
with our
transcendent
strength,
technique,
we only have
that
a
kind of
50%
courage
chance
and
of
strong
success.
will made Abyss feel
Furthermore,
ashamed and
we will
resentful.
fall into a weakened
Yi
state.
Xian's talent was
Abyss
indeed
did not want to
inferior
waste
to
the
his,
cultivation
but
he
he'd
had
schemed
just
for
recovered.
an eternity.
It should
and
be
walked
known
on
that
such a
saving the
path of
girl in
death.
the coffin
In the
was
end,
not
he
only a matter
cultivated
of
the Tao of
cultivation
three
consumption,
lifetimes,
the
but also
dangers
his
and
divine
conviction
soul
he'd
would be
experienced
affected.
during this
So,
process
are you going to
were
save her
simply
or not?
unimaginable to
Yi
him.
Xian said coldly,
Past, present,
feeling
and
Yi
future.
Xian's unfriendly and
illusory
threatening
figures
tone. Abyss
revolved
was
around
angry.
Yi Xian's
He
body,
wanted to lose his
causing
temper,
his entire
but he
body
restrained
to seem
himself.
illusory.
Since
Giving
I've
off a
promised
blurry
you,
and
I'll save
illusory
her.
feeling.
Abyss said
This was
coldly.
the condensation
Abyss
of the
said
3
coldly.
lives cultivation
Then he
and
raised
Dao.
his 5
It
fingers,
was also Yi Xian's
and the light of the
strongest
dark
moment.
samsara bloomed
Boom,
and drowned
boom,
Shi Yao.
boom,
You,
boom.
Taizong's
The 3
expression
lives
changed.
cultivation and
He
Dao
was
were
afraid that
intertwining.
Abyss would harm
It was
Shi
like
Yao,
3 lights
so he
were
hurried to
intertwining.
stop him. The power that leaked out was too shocking. It made the entire land of nothingness collapse. Whether it is the
Chapter
past,
1943.
present, or future, but
You can
before
only
he could
be
do
below
anything,
me, and I
Yi
will be
Xian
your
put a
eternal
hand on his
nightmare.
shoulder and shook his
Yi
head.
Xian stood with
Only
his
then
hands
did
behind his
Taizong
back.
calm down.
His black
Yi
clothes
Xian knew
fluttered
Abyss very
slightly.
well.
His
Although
hair
the man
fluttered
was
without
arrogant,
wind,
he wasn't
his voice
despicable.
echoed in the
Plus,
land
he
of
was
nothingness
here.
like a curse.
Even if Abyss wanted
Ha,
to
ha, ha.
play any tricks,
Abyss laughed.
he wouldn't be able
He
to
laughed
escape
wildly
Yi
as if
Xian's
he had
eyes.
heard the funniest
Dozens
joke.
of breaths later,
Desolation.
the dark samsara
Abyss raised his
disappeared.
hand and pointed
Abyss
at Yi
withdrew his
Xian.
hand.
His face
But his
began
brows
to
were
distort.
tightly knitted
He
together.
said fiercely,
"How is it?
even if you have
Yi Xian narrowed
cultivated the
his
3
eyes.
lives cultivation
Back
and
then,
Dao,
your attack
you and
shattered her
I are
soul.
both half-step eternal
Fortunately,
realm.
You
Do you
used your
really
great
think I will
powers
lose
to
to you?
preserve the last
Then
bit of
let's
her
try.
soul.
Boom.
This gave her a
Yi
chance
Xian
to
did
live.
not waste any
However,
more words.
it's extremely
His 5
difficult
fingers
to revive
slammed
her.
down on Abyss.
We'll need to work
The 3
together
lives
to cast a
cultivation
spell.
and Dao burst
Perhaps
out at
we
the
can
same
succeed.
time,
Abyss
intertwining
said in
with
a low
dazzling
voice.
and explosive
All right.
light.
Yi
The
Xian
attack
nodded
seemed
slowly,
ordinary,
then
but it had
dismissed
the
the
meaning
others.
of returning to
He
the
and Abyss
original
stood
state.
side by side.
The attack had
Their
gone
bodies
beyond the
slowly
power of
releasing
the
the
terrifying
terrifying
half-step
It
eternal
was
aura.
too horrible to
Dark
look at.
samsara, soul
Darkness.
Rumble.
Roar. Abyss
Something
turned
shocking
into a dark
happened.
samsara.
Abyss
His whole
transformed
body
into
was
the
a
dark
twisting.
samsara.
Yi Xian's
His entire
attack was
being
completely
dark
swallowed by him.
The profound
The
meaning of
samsara light
samsara
flashed
appeared in
violently,
Abyss,
and a
a
heavenly
terrifying
abyss
reversal
world-destroying
occurred.
power blasted
Eternity
toward
unity.
Yi Xian.
Hum.
Bang! Yi
With a
Xian's
punch,
entire
Abyss
body
exploded
glowed
as the 3
Yi
lifetimes
Xian's entire
laws
body
and Dao
was glowing.
bloomed.
This
This punch of his
cultivated
didn't
the
have
art of
any
samsara.
tricks. It
And
was
now
just
with
the
the
cultivation of
punch,
3 lifetimes.
but it exploded
He
with a
burst
power
forth
that
with
had never
astonishing
existed
power.
since ancient
The
times.
2 half-step eternal
Kill.
experts worked
Both of them
together,
roared at the same
and the
time.
power they released
They were
spread
both
across the
half-step
entire
eternal realm
chaos verse.
existences.
Even
At
affecting
this
time
moment,
and space,
neither of them would
Chi.
hold back.
They only
Chi.
wanted to suppress
Beams
the
of
other
light
on the
appeared
spot.
in the chaos last verse.
Bang!
Then
Fist
turned
and
into
elbow
a
collided.
shocking meteor
The
shower
void
in the
exploded.
Genesis lands.
Their bodies slammed
These
into
were the
each other.
fragments of Shi
The
Yao's
resulting
soul that
ripples
had been
of power
scattered
broke
throughout
the
the
void
ages
and affected
Yi
the
Xian
chaotic
and Abyss
universe
were working
outside.
together to cast a
Boom!
spell, condensing her soul. The
This
stars
was
in
a
the
method
outside
that had
world
never
were
been
exploding
seen before,
and a crack
In
that
fact,
stretched for
Yi
trillions
Xian
of miles
speculated
appeared.
that if he wanted to
the
revive
entire
Shi
chaos
Yao,
verse was
he would
trembling,
need to transcend
proving
the
just how
startling
terrifying the
and
tooth
enter
attack
the
was.
eternal realm.
Seal. But when
Liu
Yi
Bai
Xian's
and the
three
others'
lifetimes
expressions
combined into
changed.
one, Then
and
they
became
all
a
took
half-step
action to
eternal.
stabilize the void.
He could vaguely sense
Obviously,
that if he and Abyss
no one
joined
wanted
forces,
to see their battle
they would
destroy
be able
the chaotic
to revive
universe
Xiao.
outside.
After all,
Desolation,
both of
you are
them
no
were at
match
the
for me.
half-step eternal
Then
realm,
let's see if you have
and
the
were
ability.
considered the strongest
Bang,
experts
bang,
in the eternal
bang.
universe.
Dark Samsara,
If they joined forces,
the power of three worlds,
they would have a 50%
Xian and
chance
Abyss
of
fought
reviving
fiercely.
Xiao.
Every
Boom.
attack
The
represented
ancient
the
bronze
strongest
coffin
power
exploded,
in the eternal
and
universe.
Xiao floated in
At
the
this
air.
moment,
The soul
the more they
fragments
fought,
continued
the
to
more
pour into
ruthless
her
they
head,
became,
causing
they
her
were
body to
extremely
tremble.
ruthless,
And even
they
her
both wanted
eyelids
to
to
kill
tremble
each other.
slightly.
This battle
At this
was so
moment,
fierce that it could be
Taitsong
called
and
the
Lu
most
Bai were
powerful
very
battle
excited.
in the eternal
They stared at
universe.
Xiao.
There were no
Especially
secret
Taitsong.
techniques or
He
divine
couldn't
abilities,
control his emotions,
nor were there
and
any
he clenched
flashy
his
lights.
fists. There was
Rumble.
only the collision
All
of
of
the
a sudden,
Tao and the Tao.
a powerful
The
will
man was
suddenly
the law,
descended upon the
and the law
origin
was the
grounds.
man. And
At
blood
this
red
moment,
tribulation
the two of them weren't
above
competing on
everyone's
whose
heads.
divine abilities
Scram.
and secret arts were
Taitsong
stronger.
roared. They weren't competing on whose cultivation
The
was
immemorial
stronger.
evil light rose
Instead,
into the sky
they were
and
competing
shattered
on
the
whose
scarlet
arts
blood
and Tao were
tribulation
superior.
cloud.
They
The
were both
powerful
half-step
intent also
eternal
retreated
realm.
in an instant.
Only half a step
Reviving
away
a
from
dead
breaking
person was
through
a
to the eternal
heaven-defying
realm.
act.
The
The
two
will
of
of
them
the
turned
chaotic
into law
universe
and
had
Tao,
just arrived,
colliding fiercely
but it was
like
instantly
two
shattered
balls
by
until they
Taitsong's
completely
attack.
crushed each
In
other.
front of so many
Bang,
startling lands
bang,
and two
bang.
half-step eternal
They were
realm
brutal
experts.
and violent.
The will
There was
of the
no
chaotic
pattern.
universe
There was
couldn't
only
withstand
endless
a
collision.
single blow.
But it was
This
also
simple
the
interlude
simplest way
didn't
to
attract
fight.
the attention
At
of
their
the
level,
few people
no
who were
fancy
in the
means
middle
had
of
any
casting
effect.
their spells.
Only in this
But
way
it
could
caused
they really
Yi Xian
defeat each
and
other.
Yuan to frown.
In the endless
Both
collision,
of them were at the
Yi
half-step
Xian's body
eternal
glowed
realm,
brighter and brighter.
so their realms were
He seemed to
naturally
have
not
turned into a
comparable
light
to
ball
those startling
and crazily
lands
hit
and
Abyss. The appearance of the tribulation clouds just now seemed to be the arrival
Chapter
of the chaotic
1941.
universe's will.
Abyss did the
But it
same.
also indirectly
He lunged at
explained
Yi
a
Xian
big
crazily,
problem.
smashing
Everyone
his
present
elbow
was
at
a
Yi Xian's
startling
head.
land and Abyss
Fists
expert,
and palms
let
intertwined,
alone two
causing
half-step
endless
eternal
rumbling
realm
sounds.
experts.
The
It
battle
didn't make
lasted
sense
for half
for
a
the will
year,
of a mere
but there was
chaos
still no
verse
clear
to have
winner.
dared to descend
Based
here.
on the way they
There
fought,
had to be some
there would be
profound
no
meaning
progress,
behind this,
even if they fought
divine
for
soul
thousands of
unification.
years.
Almost
Bang,
at the same
an
time,
ancient sound of
Yi
thunder
Xian
exploded,
and Abyss shouted
the
in
two were
unison.
sent flying.
They formed the
They
eternal
quickly
god art
stabilized
with
both
themselves
hands,
and looked at each
and
other
two
from
terrifying
afar.
beams of
Puff.
light shone
A
between
mouthful
Xiao's
of blood
eyebrows.
spurted out of Abyss'
It was at
mouth,
this moment that
mixed with
Xiao's fingers
terrifying
began to
essence
tremble.
energy.
On
And
the
her
other
beautiful
side,
eyes
Yi
opened with
Xian
great
was not having a
difficulty.
good time either.
Xiao, his
When
chest
chest
had
had
caved
caved
in,
Xiao opened
and
her
the three
eyes.
realms
He
technique
immediately rushed
and
to
Dao
her
were
side.
repairing his body.
He was so happy
Abyss
that he
was
cried
really
and
strong.
held
Xiao's
even with
hands
Yi
tightly.
Xian's three realms
Tai,
technique in Dao.
Taitsong, he was not at a disadvantage.
Didn't I die?
Xiao
Desolation,
murmured,
it's time to end
she
this.
stared blankly at
Abyss roared
Taitsong in front
fiercely,
of her, and his
feeling as if
expression
she had just
gradually
woken
became
up from
solemn.
an eternal dream.
The dark light of
It gave her an
reincarnation made
extremely
him illusory
unreal feeling,
and he began
You
to
won't
turn
die.
into a gate
I
of
said I'll save you.
reincarnation. Taitsong
Reincarnation
shouted excitedly.
reincarnation.
Big brother,
This was the highest
Xiao's
level of the
consciousness
nine
finally
calamity
woke
abyss
up.
technique.
When she
And
saw
also
Yi
Abyss's
Xian,
strongest
she seemed
state.
to understand
Obviously,
something.
he wanted
You're
to
still
end
very
the battle
weak now.
with one blow.
You need to consolidate
careful.
your divine soul.
Lu Bai's
We'll talk
expression
again
was
after
heavy
you
as he
recover,
loudly reminded
Yi
Yi
Xian
Xian.
said with a smile.
This was because he could
Little
already
sister,
feel the will of
Lu
the
Bai
abyss.
came to Xiao's
The next
side with a
attack would
smile
definitely
and
determine
told
the
her what
victor.
had happened.
Without Lu Bai's
Desolation.
warning,
I've done
Yi
the first
Xian's
thing
aura
for you.
became obscure.
You can tell me the last
three realms
thing.
technique
Abyss
and
said
Dao were
coldly.
flickering on his body.
I need you to come with
and
me
a
for
great
the
power
last
was
thing.
growing in his
Yi
body.
Xian lightly smiled,
Facing this final
then
blow,
took a step
Yi
forward
Xian's
and
heart was
disappeared.
heavy.
Abyss
was frowned,
forcibly fusing
but
the
still
three
followed
realms
Yi
technique
Xian into the
and Dao
distance.
together to
Yuan
suppress
Tu's
Abyss
expressions
with one
were
blow.
complicated,
But Yi
they
Xian
didn't
knew
say
very
goodbye
well
to Lu Bai
that
and the
forcibly
other two,
fusing the three
and
realms
directly
technique
disappeared.
and Dao was
Obviously, they were
extremely
enemies,
difficult
not
for him.
friends,
And there was
no
even the
need to say
danger of a
goodbye.
backlash.
At this moment,
Three realms in one was not
Taitsong
that
and
simple.
Xiao were talking
It was
about
a
their
power
feelings.
beyond the eternal
Lu
universe,
Bai accompanied
the
them
so-called
with a
eternal
smile.
realm.
However,
Yi
Lu
Xian
Bai's
was far
aura
from
was
reaching
obscure.
this level.
Occasionally,
But he could only
he looked up
forcefully
at the
fuse
eternal
a trace
starry
of the
sky
three
with a
worlds
confused
profound
look in
meaning
his eyes
to unleash his
It
strongest
seemed that he was
attack.
absent-minded.
The Tao of the three
Eldritch realms.
world.
Since
What?
ancient times, who can rival it?
You want me to
Rumble.
help you resurrect
Yi
the
Xian
dead?
roared at the sky.
Abyss was furious,
The terrifying
and looked at Yi
tricolored
Xian
light
with
flickered
hatred.
crazily on
At
his
this
body.
moment, he was
Faintly
really
wanting
angry
to
and
fuse
wanted to
together.
leave.
What kind of joke was
Xian's
this?
body was
He had
bursting
just
with
resurrected
eternal light.
Xiao. This
And
kind of
he had
light had
consumed
never
half
been
of
seen
his
before.
cultivation.
It was
Even
formed
his
by
divine
Yi Xian's
soul was
forceful
starting to
fusion
weaken.
of the three realms
Now the
technique
second
and
thing Yi
Tao.
Xian
The
wanted him
ages
to do
trembled
was to
and the void
resurrect some
exploded.
ants.
Terrifying
He couldn't
ripples
accept this.
spread out from Yi
That's
Xian's
right.
body.
Yi
Just
Xian
his
wanted
aura
to
alone was
resurrect
enough
the
to
old
make
people
everyone present
and let them
retreat in
reappear
fear in the world.
Dark
He
Samsara,
couldn't succeed
only
by
king of all
himself,
ages.
so he needed
One.
Abyss's help.
His entire body
Then are
had
you going to help
transformed
or
into
not?
the dark gate
Yi
of
Xian
Samsara.
lightly said as
At
his
this
eyes
moment,
stared at the abyss.
the gate of Samsara
Yes,
was wide open.
Abyss was
and
indignant.
it was spinning in a terrifying
However, he
manner
was defeated by
as it
Yi
charged towards
Xian,
Yi Xian to
and
devour
he even
him.
agreed to Yi
Kill.
Xian's two
Boom.
conditions. It was just that Abyss couldn't figure it out. Reviving Xiao was one thing. After all, Xiao was a primordial goddess and a living, breathing absolute. However, Yi Xian wanted to resurrect some ants. This really confused him. What good would it do him? Unfortunately, Abyss didn't know that in Yi Xian's heart, those old people who had passed away were much more important than Xiao. That was his guilt. He had waited for countless years. Now that he finally came to this step, he didn't want to continue waiting. Chapter 1944. It was his guilt. He'd waited for countless years, and now that he'd finally reached this point, he didn't want to wait any longer. If Yi Xian had only relied on himself, it would have been extremely difficult to resurrect his old friends. However, things were different with Abyss's help. Even Xiao, who was a terrifying existence, had been successfully resurrected. Naturally, his old friends would be no problem at all. Lay the formation. It was an unprecedented grand reincarnation formation. Yi Xian and Abyss had worked together to lay the formation. Both of them cultivated the mysteries of reincarnation and were half-step eternal realm experts. Working together, the grand reincarnation formation could be said to be the most powerful formation since ancient times. The formation defied the reincarnation of heaven and earth. It could change space-time and reassemble those whose bodies and souls had been destroyed, allowing them to reappear in the world. However, there were many people who needed to be resurrected. It wasn't just one person, so they needed to lay out the grand reincarnation formation and reassemble those who died. This was an extremely complicated project. Fortunately, with the cultivation of Yi Xian and Abyss, it didn't take much time to set up the Samsara Great Formation. Desolation, do you feel it? When the grand reincarnation formation was laid out, Abyss's expression turned solemn. He looked at Yi Xian with deep dark eyes. Resurrect the will of the chaotic universe that appeared in Xiao. Yi Xian nodded solemnly. Someone is spying on us, Abyss said solemnly. It's the mysterious being in the gate of reincarnation above the eternal universe, Yi Xian murmured. The two had a brief conversation, then fell silent. They didn't need to say much. Both of them felt an extremely heavy pressure. It was as if a gaze from beyond the eternal universe had landed on the two of them, making them feel extremely uncomfortable. Are you afraid? Abyss pretended to be relaxed and smiled mockingly at Yi Xian. Afraid? Yi Xian also smiled, but his smile was very cold, and he said, the one who should be afraid is you, not me, because I will definitely transcend and truly become eternal. What a joke! Don't think that just because you've embarked on the path of 3 lives as one, you can walk ahead of me first. Let me tell you, your life is mine, and I will definitely enter the eternal realm before you. Then, I will push open the gate of reincarnation and break the curse of eternal reincarnation, Abyss shouted coldly. I hope you can succeed. Yi Xian spoke calmly, but his hands were not idle. He finished setting up the last corner of the array, and the grand reincarnation array beneath his feet began to operate, bursting out with a Tongtian light that penetrated the ground. Reincarnation Grand Array, heaven and earth were in chaos. Yi Xian and Abyss stood within the grand samsara formation, their bodies glowing with light. This was the light of the profound truths of samsara, which had broken through the shackles of the chaos verse. There was an old saying that went, everything is decided by the heavens. However, Yi Xian was someone who didn't believe in the heavens or fate. Looking back on the vicissitudes of life, there were always some people who had left a deep mark on Yi Xian's life. Even after endless years, Yi Xian could not forget them. Severing love, abandoning love, and ascending to the 9 heavens. Yi Xian looked back on the past. He had experienced a lot along the way. There were some things he knew were wrong, but he had to make mistakes again and again. Some people could not have died, but because of him, they were buried in the endless years. Today, he was half-step eternal realm. It could be said that he was half a step away from the eternal universe. There was no one who could keep him in check. Even the eternal universe could not do anything to him. Those who had passed away would finally return today. The guilt in his heart would also be released today. Samsara heaven and earth return the souls. Almost at the same time, Yi Xian and Abyss roared in unison. The grand samsara formation beneath their feet spun in terrifying reverse. The light of samsara filled the world. The two half-step eternal realm cultivators simply shook the entire eternal universe. Invincible throughout the ages, the sole master of the present age. Whether it was Yi Xian or Abyss, the two had reached the strongest realm in the eternal universe. At this moment, they joined forces to open the grand samsara formation to revive some of the dead. No one could stop them, not even the eternal universe. Chi chi chi. The grand samsara formation spun in reverse. The space between heaven and earth was distorted. The broken soul fragments in the world gathered towards the grand samsara formation. Several blurry figures were condensing in the grand samsara formation. Clang! Clang! Where am I? Looking around blankly, Tong Tian raised his hands helplessly. Clang! 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 Yi Xian was extremely gratified to see his old friend again. He waved his hand and struck out with the 4 immortal slaying swords. Clang! 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 The 4 immortal slaying swords circled around his body. The immortal slaying swords rotated above his head. The killing light poured down and completely merged with Tong Tian. Yi Xian! Yi Xian! Tong Tian was speechless. He clearly remembered that he had died. Moreover, his soul had been destroyed. How did he come back to life again? But when he felt the 4 immortal slaying swords and saw Yi Xian smiling at him, he knew that he was not dreaming. He had really come back to life. Clang! Yi Xian! The reincarnation grand design under his feet spun in reverse once again. A second figure began to take form in the reincarnation grand design. Wang! A dazzling golden light appeared in the array. Looking through this dazzling golden light, one could see a rock in the array. The golden light was coming from this rock. Brother Wukong, wake up! Yi Xian's eyes were slightly fiery, and there was even a hint of anticipation within them. Bang! The mischievous rock exploded, and a monkey rushed out from the mischievous rock. Its golden fur was shining, and an untamed battle intent that could pierce through the heavens and the earth was shocking. Transform! Untamed and untamed. The monkey stretched his body between heaven and earth. Streaks of golden fighting spirit erupted from his body, illuminating the entire world. A Rui Jingu Bang shot over from the horizon. He held it in his hand. The golden shadow of the Rui Jingu Bang danced in the sky. A loud roar could be heard. Congratulations on your return, Brother Wukong. Yi Xian bowed with a gratified expression. He would never forget the scene when Sun Wukong transformed the world for him. Now that Sun Wukong had returned, he could fight again. The great sage, heaven's equal who would never admit defeat, would continue to write his own legend. Brother, thank you. Sun Wukong retracted his golden light. He looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. Then he nodded with gratification. He had always believed that Yi Xian could reach the peak. He also believed that he would return to the world. It was all because he believed in Yi Xian. Brother, please wait a moment. Yi Xian forced himself to calm down. There were still old friends who needed to return. Now was not the time for the two of them to catch up. Chapter 1945. Rumble. The great reincarnation matrix was spinning in reverse in a terrifying manner. A bright moonlight rose up from the matrix, and then it formed a gentle and beautiful figure. Yi Xian. She was unparalleled in the world. Heaven and earth lost their color. That was not enough to describe the beauty of the moon fairy. Just her confused eyes made Yi Xian's heart tremble. Yi Xian had no choice but to admit that the beauty of the moon fairy was still the only one. All the beautiful words that could be used to describe her were unable to describe her. Didn't I die? Fairy Guanghan murmured as she looked at Yi Xian with a pair of sorrowful eyes. It was as if this was just a dream, and it was so unreal. Seeing his former lover again, Yi Xian had mixed feelings. He had killed the moon fairy with his own hands. The guilt had always been in his heart. Yi Xian was speechless. He slowly walked over to the unparalleled woman and gently pulled her into his embrace. It's all over. You're still alive. Fairy Guanghan leaned into Yi Xian's embrace in a daze. She could feel Yi Xian's familiar aura, and she could even feel his body temperature. This also caused his bewildered, beautiful eyes to focus. I'm really still alive? The moon fairy bit her lips. She held Yi Xian's cheeks and looked at him with infatuation. Huang, don't be sentimental. I've lost more than half of my cultivation. If you don't hurry up, the reincarnation matrix will collapse. Abyss growled. He really couldn't stand Yi Xian being sentimental with a woman. Wait for me. Yi Xian gave the moon fairy a comforting look. He stood side by side with Abyss again. The reincarnation matrix shone brightly and sped up again. Buzz! This time, there was profound light condensing in the formation, and a graceful figure appeared, condensing at an extremely fast speed. Empyrean Fairy. She was dressed in white and looked around blankly. However, when she saw Yi Xian, her eyes froze. She could only see Yi Xian's face. A clear tear slowly fell from her eye. Sorry I'm late. If there was one person Yi Xian felt the most guilty towards, it would definitely be the Empyrean Fairy. When he was in the untainted world, he was the master of the celestial court. The Empyrean Fairy married him and supported the celestial court for him. She had no regrets. When the 12 ancestors of sorcery arrived at the celestial court, they transformed into the real bodies of Pengu and stomped the Empyrean Fairy to death, destroying her body and soul between heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, an illusory flower bloomed. The two of them did not speak, but walked to each other's side and hugged each other tightly. Although they did not speak, everything was in silence. The two of them had understood each other through the exchange of glances. Wait for me. Yi Xian gently pushed Mystic Fairy away. Mystic Fairy nodded silently. However, the way she looked at Yi Xian was still as gentle as before. Hurry up, we don't have time. The reincarnation matrix consumes too much of our cultivation, Abyss shouted coldly. It was only because Yi Xian was silent and did not move. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes were in a trance. A complicated look flashed across his eyes. His eyes were extremely erratic. At this moment, he wanted to see many people again. His mother, his younger siblings, his childhood sweetheart Xia Qingzhu, the extremely kind Gu Xiaoxiao, and many members of the celestial court who had died with him. But at this moment, Yi Xian hesitated. Because these people were different from the Empyrean Fairy. The Empyrean Fairy and the others had died in body and soul. However, his mother, younger siblings had been reincarnated countless times. They were still alive in the world in a different form. It was impossible for them to reassemble their souls, unless Yi Xian used his great power to summon their reincarnated bodies here, and then unlock the sealed memories of the 10,000 reincarnations. But so what? After experiencing the 10,000 reincarnations, they were no longer the same people. Hey, what are you waiting for? Abyss frowned and growled. At this moment, he was operating the reincarnation matrix. His cultivation was greatly depleted, so he was naturally anxious. Fate comes and goes. Fate meets and disperses. Everything is gone with the wind. Yi Xian sighed. He waved his sleeves, and the reincarnation matrix beneath his feet dispersed. The operation of the world returned to normal. Desolation. I've helped you fulfill both conditions. From now on, you and I owe each other nothing. Remember, when I step into the eternal realm, you will be doomed eternally. Abyss did not care about the people that Yi Xian had resurrected. These people were not even worth ants in his eyes. The only opponent in his heart was Yi Xian. After Abyss said that, he took a step and disappeared. From now on he would pursue the eternal realm. He had to step into the eternal realm before Yi Xian, and kill Yi Xian with his own hands. Husband. Empyrean Fairy and Moon Fairy quietly came behind Yi Xian. They accompanied him silently just like before. Brother. Sun Wukong did not know who Abyss was, but he could feel the horror of Abyss. Even a glance from Abyss could make his heart tremble. Yi Daoyu, thank you. Tong Tian came with the 4 immortal slaying swords. He could feel the power of Yi Xian, and knew that Yi Xian had surpassed him by many realms. Come with me to the chaotic world. Yi Xian laughed heartily. We will go wherever you go. The 9 heavens profound maiden, and the Guanghan Fairy spoke at the same time. Even Yi Xian felt that it was a bit unbearable for these 2 peerless beauties to stand together. Your cultivation is too weak. But this is not a problem. Yi Xian did not dare to look directly at the two women, and quickly changed the topic. Brother. Just as Yi Xian and the others were talking, three figures suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. They were the three earth-shattering empaths of the primitive age. Sister. Yi Xian nodded his head in gratification, as he looked at Shi Yao's strange smile. Brother they are? Shi Yao was still the same as before. Even if she had been sleeping for thousands of years, she was still weird. When she saw the state of the two women and Yi Xian, she naturally thought of the relationship between the two women and Yi Xian. Yi Xian wasn't good at emotional matters, so he hurriedly changed the topic and said, Little sister, now that you've woken up from your slumber, the two of them are too weak. Your illusionary technique is suitable for them, so I'll leave the task of cultivation to you. Brother, don't worry. I will take care of the cultivation of the two sisters-in-law. Shi Yao smiled playfully, then took the two women's hands and ran to the side. The three women also chatted amiably. Brother Wukong, fellow Taoist Skirich, this world is not the same as before. The so-called immortals are not worth mentioning. These two brothers of mine can be said to be the pinnacle existences of the eternal universe. In the coming days, let them guide you in your cultivation. Yi Xian introduced Lu Bai and Tai Tsong to Sun Wukong and the Grandmaster of Heaven. After all, the two of them had just been resurrected, and their cultivation was still at the same level as before. It would be best if they could have two heaven-shaking absolute lands to help them cultivate. Without Yi Xian's introduction, Sun Wukong and Tong Tian had already felt the power of the two earth-shattering empaths. Sun Wukong was arrogant and had a fighting spirit that did not accept the world. It was very compatible with Tai Tsong's Taixitsong heaven method, so Sun Wukong naturally chose Tai Tsong. As for Tong Tian, he naturally chose to follow Lu Bai to cultivate. Everyone chatted for a while, and then under the leadership of Yi Xian, they left and returned to the chaotic world. Because the 12th Yuanhui would start in a year, Yi Xian did not have much time to meet with his old friends. He still had very important things to do. When the 12th Yuanhui started, the 12th small cauldron would also be born. Yi Xian still needed to combine the three worlds. Only in this way could he truly step into the eternal realm. Although it seemed that there was still a Yuanhui, for Yi Xian, time was really tight. He had to combine the three worlds before the samsara destruction, create the strongest method of all time, and step into the eternal realm himself. Only then could he deal with the final tribulation. Chapter 1946. Chaotic World, Central Territory. A heavenly palace spanned between heaven and earth, and there were countless divine soldiers and divine generals patrolling heaven and earth, setting off this heavenly palace to the extreme. Zhentian Palace. This was the dojo built by Yi Xian's disciples for him, and it was also the only holy land in the entire chaotic universe, revered by all living beings in the chaos. Yi Xian was the most important person in the world. After 11 Yuanhui periods in the chaotic universe, Yi Xian's name had already resounded throughout the universe. Even his disciples were the strongest throughout the ages, and no one dared to challenge him. On this day, Zhentian Palace was extremely lively. It could be said that it was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and the rumbling of bells echoed throughout the entire chaotic world. Old friends reunited, toasting each other. In the imperial palace, Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen sat on the left and right sides of Yi Xian, accompanied by three peerless beauties: Extreme Love Master, Guanghan Fairy, and Empyrean Fairy. These three women were all beautiful. At this moment, they were all accompanying Yi Xian, and all of them were Yi Xian's confidants. The three earth-shattering extremes and Sun Wukong Tongtian sat in the seats of honor, while Yi Xian's disciples sat behind. There were also many familiar faces of Yi Xian seated below. Everyone was drinking and chatting merrily, and it was very lively. This time, Yi Xian's return made Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen the happiest. These two guys had been by Yi Xian's side since the human world, and they had witnessed Yi Xian's step-by-step progress to today's realm. The most excited people were Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen. Today's grand event was only about friendship, and no disputes were discussed. In the midst of everyone's conversation, Yi Xian was also extremely emotional. There was only one thing that made Yi Xian feel awkward, and that was the existence of the three women. It could be said that Yi Xian was extremely repulsed by matters of the heart. At this moment, all three women were his wife in name, so he did not know how to face them. However, what surprised Yi Xian was that the three women seemed to be very harmonious. This was beyond Yi Xian's expectations. The Guanghan Fairy and the Nine Heavens Profound Maiden were already familiar with each other, so there was no need to mention it. The fact that the two of them were able to get along well with the Lord of Extreme Love was indeed a bit surprising to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian did not dwell on these feelings. After all, in his eyes, the so-called love did not occupy anything. He only wanted to become stronger. The event lasted for 7 days and 7 nights. During this time, the Lord of Human Tao and the Lord of Spacetime arrived one after another. The shadow of Aeon was also hiding in the shadows, protecting the entire sky-burying palace. The saddest of all was Aeon's shadow. He was a taboo character, but he had secretly become Yi Xian's servant, helping him protect the entire sky-burying palace. But when he saw the 3 shocking lands of despair, and learned that Yi Xian was half a step away from Eternal Realm, all his arrogance disappeared. He was truly desperate to be a servant. Finally, the gathering of old friends was finally over. Everyone returned to their own dojos to rest. Only Yi Xian and Fatso Huang were left in the palace. They've all gone to rest. Why haven't you left? Yi Xian smiled. He hadn't been alone with Fatso Huang for a long time. He looked at Fatso Huang with a teasing smile. Mister, there is something I don't know if I should say. Fatso Huang frowned. He quietly looked around, as if to see if anyone was eavesdropping on their conversation. What do you want to say? Yi Xian was startled. The Moon Fairy, Fatso Huang said in a low voice. What happened to her? Yi Xian hesitated slightly, but a strange look flashed in his eyes. He had already vaguely guessed Fatso Huang's intentions. My good mister, have you forgotten that you killed her with your own hands? Although she has been resurrected this time, can't you be sure what she is thinking? Fatso Huang frowned. As Fatso Huang's words fell, Yi Xian fell silent. He knew that Fatso Huang was right. He had killed the Moon Fairy with his own hands, and this matter had always been a knot in his heart. Mister, I'm not afraid that she will harm you. After all, her cultivation is right there. I'm just afraid that you will lose yourself in her beauty and destroy your Taoist foundation, Fatso Huang said worriedly. It was no wonder that Fatso Huang reminded Yi Xian. After all, the Moon Fairy had enchanted everyone in the untainted world. Fatso Huang was afraid that Yi Xian would fall into an emotional whirlpool and be unable to extricate himself. Because he had followed Yi Xian all the way here, Fatso Huang had already discovered Yi Xian's greatest weakness. Love. That's right, it was love. Although Yi Xian seemed to have severed his feelings and abandoned his love, it was precisely because Yi Xian knew that this was his greatest weakness that he displayed merciless ruthlessness. Killing Xia Qingzhu and strangling the Moon Fairy with his own hands seemed like a vicious move by Yi Xian. But it actually meant that Yi Xian was afraid of falling into love. That was why he had done this. Therefore, Yi Xian had always resisted so-called love, whether it was the extreme love master or the human Tao master who was interested in him. Even Shi Yao, who had just arrived at Buried Heaven Palace. These women all had feelings for him. But Yi Xian had always been cold and indifferent. He did not want to be tainted at all. Yi Xian was afraid. He was afraid of these feelings, so he showed disdain for love. In fact, this was also his greatest weakness. You are the only one who knows me, Fatso Huang. Yi Xian laughed at himself, and then patted Fatso Huang on the shoulder. Sir, it's not that I have a problem with the Moon Fairy. If you didn't kill her with your own hands, I wouldn't have said anything. But you still have to be careful about this matter. Fatso Huang reminded him in a deep voice. Speaking of viciousness and ruthlessness, Fatso Huang was not inferior to Yi Xian. He saw through the so-called love more clearly. After all, before he followed Yi Xian, Fatso Huang was deeply hurt because of love. He even killed the woman he loved most with his own hands. Then he was thrown into the prison. But in the end, He was saved by Yi Xian, and followed Yi Xian all the way to the chaotic world. Love was the most hurtful. It was like an invisible sword that could pierce people's hearts, and make them feel so painful that they would rather die. It really had little to do with cultivation. Fatso Huang was worried about Yi Xian, so he naturally had to remind Yi Xian. Perhaps if others advised Yi Xian, it would make Yi Xian angry, and think that they were trying to sow discord between Yi Xian and the Moon Fairy. But Fatso Huang was different. To put it bluntly, in Yi Xian's heart, Fatso Huang was much more important than the Moon Fairy. If one of them had to die, Yi Xian would definitely choose the Moon Fairy. Don't worry, I know what to do. Yi Xian nodded slowly. In that case, I'm relieved. The 3 mistresses are waiting for you tonight. You should have a good rest. Fatso Huang smiled wretchedly, and gave Yi Xian a look that all men understood. Then he left. Yi Xian was stunned and then smiled helplessly. He was really speechless about Fatso. Except for Lu Bai, who was his close friend, Fatso Huang was the only one who could confide in him. Chapter 1947. It was lonely at the top. When one reached Yi Xian's level, even his old friends were in awe of him, and their words were restrained. However, Fatso Huang was the only one who was not restrained at all. Where should I go? After Fatso Huang's reminder, Yi Xian mumbled to himself. At this moment, there were 3 beauties waiting for him. This was also an extremely difficult thing to do. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed and chose the Moon Fairy. It was not because of the blessings, but because he wanted to resolve the knot in his heart. Moon Palace. This was the dojo that Yi Xian's disciple had built for the Moon Fairy. It was also built according to the Moon Palace in the untainted world. Even a Tongtian osmanthus tree was rooted beside the Moon Palace. It had completely restored the original appearance of the Moon Palace. When Yi Xian entered the Moon Palace, he saw the Moon Fairy sitting on the frost jade bed. When she noticed Yi Xian's arrival, her beautiful and cold face blushed slightly. The Moon Fairy was indescribably beautiful. Her rosy cheeks were tender and tender. Coupled with her exquisite figure, Yi Xian's heart beat slightly faster. As long as it was a man, he wouldn't be able to resist such a beauty. Yi Xian was naturally no exception. However, Yi Xian could control himself and remain calm and collected. Xiao Yi. Yi Xian came to the Moon Fairy's side. He wanted to say something but stopped. He had already thought of how to say it, but he did not know what to say. I don't blame you. Perhaps sensing that Yi Xian wanted to say something, the Moon Fairy bit her lips and said, "The Mystic Fairy has already explained to me. Back then, in order to break through to a higher level, you fell into a state of madness. In order to pass the love tribulation, you had to give up love." Speaking of this, the Moon Fairy's eyes were filled with tears. She looked up at Yi Xian and said, "Actually, all these years, I have always wanted to ask you something." Looking at the weeping beauty, Yi Xian sighed softly and said, "Speak. Is cultivation really more important than love in your life?" Fairy Guanghan bit her lip and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback by this question, but he didn't hesitate for long before giving Fairy Guanghan a definite answer. As the saying goes, love is nothing more than an illusion, and beauties are nothing more than pink skeletons. Only eternal strength is the most real existence, Yi Xian said solemnly. The Moon Fairy smiled, but her smile was a little sad. She looked relieved and said, "You are still you. You haven't changed at all after so many years. If you could choose again, I think you would still kill me, wouldn't you?" Not bad. What was a straight man? At this moment, Yi Xian was a straight man. If it were any other man, he would definitely lie to his lover. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was not one of them. After getting the answer she wanted, Fairy Guanghan's gaze was complicated. She really loved and hated Yi Xian. All kinds of complicated emotions were stirred up. Actually, I really can't compare to Empyrean Fairy. She knows that you don't care about love, but she is still willing to stay by your side. She is even willing to die for you. She has no regrets, Fairy Guanghan murmured. Literally, actually, you don't have to feel conflicted. I have abandoned many things for cultivation, family, love, and even friendship. In order to become stronger, I have become a heartless person. You know this better than anyone else. So even if you leave now, I will understand. Since he had already said this, Yi Xian had nothing to hide. After all, the knot in their hearts needed to be untied. No need to say more. I just want to be like Empyrean Fairy, and be by your side forever. Even if you don't love me, I will have no regrets. In the next moment, the entire Guanghan Palace was covered by fog. A white palace dress was scattered on the ground. Yi Xian's surprised voice could be heard. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Perhaps it was also the most beautiful night of Yi Xian's life. Outside the Guanghan Palace, Fatso Huang pouted. Then he murmured wretchedly, "Since ancient times, heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. This saying is true." Sir, you are so talented." Fatso Huang looked up in shock. The sky changed. The Empyrean Fairy and the Extreme Love Master had actually entered the Guanghan Palace. This made him murmur. His eyes were full of admiration. 1 dragon and 3 phoenixes. TSK, TSK, TSK. Fatso Huang praised loudly. However, Yi Xian's scolding came from inside the Guanghan Palace. "Get lost." Fatso Huang hurriedly disappeared. It was naturally better for him to stay away from this kind of thing. The next day, Yi Xian walked out of the Guanghan Palace, looking a little tired. It was as if he had just fought with abyss for thousands of years, and almost died at his hands. This night almost took away half of Yi Xian's old life. However, he really wanted more. "Sir." As soon as Yi Xian entered the Guanghan Palace, Fatso Huang hurriedly came to greet him. Yi Xian's expression changed. He hurriedly swept away his tiredness and appeared calm and composed. "Hee, sir, you still have lipstick marks on your neck." Fatso Huang laughed shamelessly. This immediately shocked Yi Xian. He clearly remembered that when he came out of the Guanghan Palace, he deliberately observed his appearance. There was nothing strange at all. "Damn it! You even dare to tease me now." Seeing Fatso Huang's wretched and shameless smile, Yi Xian suddenly understood. He laughed and slapped Fatso Huang away. "Sir, please don't be angry. I was just joking." Fatso Huang trotted back and smiled obsequiously. "Don't tell anyone about what happened yesterday. Otherwise, if I find out, I'll skin you alive." Yi Xian scolded jokingly. "Sir, don't worry." Fatso Huang, I swear on my honor that this matter will not be spread. Otherwise, you don't have to do it. I'll skin you myself. Fatso Huang chuckled. Where's your honor?" Yi Xian was completely speechless at Fatso Huang. It was rare for the two of them to joke around, but it also showed the affection between brothers. "Sir, there's still a year until the 12th Ian. I've already done everything you asked me to do. However, there's still no sign of the strongest in the 12th Ian." When it came to business, Fatty Huang put away his cheeky smile. "No matter. When the 12th Ian opens, the 12th strongest will naturally appear. The only thing I'm concerned about is when the 12th heavenly void shattering cauldron will appear," Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Yi Xian naturally wanted to obtain the 12th heavenly void shattering cauldron, because he needed it to open the gate of reincarnation. Moreover, Yi Xian had reached perfection in the 3 realms technique in Tao. However, if he wanted to combine the 3 realms and create the strongest technique and Tao of all time, reaching the realm of eternal transcendence, there was no opportunity at all. Perhaps Yi Xian guessed that the opportunity was in the 12th small cauldron. Chapter 1948. Heaven is heaven, earth is earth. This was the saying of heaven, earth and heaven. At the beginning of time, all things were born. Since the beginning of the desolate era, countless chaotic universes had been created. All things came from nothing, from something to nothing, and from nothing to beginning. This cycle was endless. When the 11th period ended and the 12th period began, the entire chaotic universe began to change. Spirit chi filled the entire chaotic universe, filling it with vitality. All things competed. The goal was to become the strongest. When the 12th period began, an unavoidable war broke out. In order to compete for the position of the strongest in the 12th period, countless beings killed each other. They wanted to prove their Tao and become the master of the 12th period. Heaven Burying Palace. Yi Xian breathed in and out. The laws and Taos of the 3 lifetimes lingered around his body. He didn't show any concern for the arrival of the 12th period. He was comprehending laws and creating Taos. Yi Xian wanted to combine the 3 lifetimes as one. This was an extremely difficult path. It was extremely difficult to combine the laws and Taos of the 3 lifetimes. Why is it like this? Boom! A terrifying ripple spread out from Yi Xian's body, causing the surrounding void to distort and shatter. At this moment he slowly opened his eyes. Disappointment. Extreme disappointment. The 12th period had been open for 100 million years. Yi Xian had been comprehending the 3 lifetimes as one for 100 million years. But in the end, he didn't gain anything. Instead, he almost suffered a backlash from the laws and Taos of the 3 lifetimes. Difficult, difficult, difficult. This was the most difficult hurdle for Yi Xian to break through. Although the 3 lifetimes as one sounded simple, it was impossible to achieve. Past, present, and future. 3 different laws and Taos were incompatible like water and fire. As soon as they merged, a tremendous backlash burst out. Even with Yi Xian's half-step eternal cultivation, he couldn't bear it. Yi Xian once stubbornly tried to combine the laws and Taos of the 3 lifetimes as one, but it almost destroyed his body and soul. After this, Yi Xian learned his lesson and gave up on this method. Yi Xian fell into deep thought. He recalled all the laws he knew, and even took out the ancient bronze scripture and heaven-punishing halberd to study them together. But he still couldn't find a way to combine the 3 lifetimes as one. Sir! Suddenly, Fatso Huang quietly appeared beside Yi Xian and bowed to Yi Xian. Has the strongest of the 12th Ian appeared? Yi Xian's thoughts turned as he raised his head to look at Fatty Huang. He wasn't concerned about who would become the strongest in the 12th Yuan Hui. What he was truly concerned about was the whereabouts of the last small cauldron. Mister, speaking of which, it's a little strange. 100 million years have already passed, but the 12th strongest has yet to appear. Fatso Huang reported. That's strange. Yi Xian was startled at first, then he fell into deep thought. One had to know that with the opening of every Yuan Hui, a new strongest would appear in an extremely short period of time. It definitely wouldn't be too late. But now that more than 100 million years had passed, and the last utmost powerful being had yet to appear, Yi Xian found it a little strange. He could vaguely feel that something was amiss. Is there any news about the last small cauldron? Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. Fatso Huang smiled bitterly and shook his head. He had sent out almost all of Buried Heaven Palace's people to search for it, but there were no clues at all. It seems that the opportunity for the last small cauldron still lies with the last strongest. Yi Xian frowned and said, the birth of every small cauldron was related to one of the strongest. It was just like the fate of the chaotic space-time. The 3 of them had all obtained a small cauldron. It was the same for the other strongest. They had all obtained a small cauldron several times. His disciple Yi Xian had obtained it by chance and then gave it to Yi Xian. According to this logic, the last small cauldron must be closely related to the last strongest. It seems that I have to make a trip personally. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He had already made up his mind. He would personally search for the last strongest and the last small cauldron. Sir, there's no need to trouble you for such a small matter. Just leave it to me. Fatso Huang hurriedly dissuaded him. After all, Yi Xian had finally been able to stay in Buried Heaven Palace peacefully. All of his enemies had already been eliminated. If he had to do such a small matter personally, Fatso Huang would feel guilty. This is already the last Yuan Hui. I don't want any accidents to happen. Moreover, I still haven't been able to comprehend 3 worlds as one. It's good to go out for a walk. Yi Xian said. I'm incompetent. Fatso Huang bowed guiltily. He didn't feel good about not being able to complete such a small matter. It's not your fault. It's related to the small cauldron. It's not something you can control. Yi Xian patted Fatso Huang's shoulder and comforted him. Yi Daoyu. Suddenly, an anxious voice came from outside the imperial palace. A figure arrived in an instant. It was Tong Tian. Yi Xian was startled. Tong Tian was obviously cultivating with Lu Bai. Why would he come here with an anxious face? Could something have happened? What happened? Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. An extremely bad feeling rose in his heart. Yi Daoyu, quickly go and take a look at Daoist Bai Yi. Something's wrong with him, Tong Tian said with a heavy expression. Buzz. As soon as Tong Tian finished speaking, Yi Xian instantly disappeared from the imperial palace. Who am I? Who am I? Ah! Lu Bai covered his head and roared. His eyes were bloodshot. He crawled on the ground and crazily hit the ground. The terrifying force caused the ground to crack. Seal. Shi Yao and Tai Song had a heavy expression. They were casting seals on Lu Bai's body to stabilize his emotions. Yi Xian instantly appeared. When he saw Lu Bai's crazed appearance, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. He already understood Lu Bai's situation at the moment. He once again fell into self-denial. He was entangled in the memories of Tai Chu and Lu Bai. He could no longer tell which one was him. Brother Bai, wake up! Yi Xian roared. He wanted to wake up Lu Bai, who had gone berserk, but it was completely useless. Lu Bai's eyes were bloodshot as he continued to roar. At this moment, Lu Bai's expression was ferocious like a madman. Even the two earth-shattering seals couldn't suppress him. Brother, his divine soul is shattering. If we don't stop him, he will really go crazy and die with his divine soul shattered. Shi Yao said anxiously. She and Taitsong cast seals to suppress Lu Bai. However, they could only suppress his cultivation. They couldn't stop his divine soul from shattering. Who am I? Who am I? Lu Bai's eyes were bloodshot. He kept grabbing his hair and roaring crazily. His eyes were full of confusion, as if he had lost his mind. Freeze! Yi Xian pointed his finger and fixed Lu Bai in place. The three world arts and Dao stabilized Lu Bai's divine soul. However, Lu Bai still couldn't calm down. This made Yi Xian's expression extremely solemn. Chapter 1949. Yi Xian didn't expect Lu Bai's situation to be so serious. He really didn't know what to do to help Lu Bai. Brother Bai, you are you. In this life, you are Lu Bai. You have never been anyone else. Yi Xian roared, hoping that Lu Bai would come to his senses. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's words seemed to ignite a fuse, completely igniting Lu Bai. His aura became even more chaotic and crazy, and he kept growling, "Who am I? Big brother, we can't go on like this. Otherwise, even if his divine soul survives, his consciousness will fall into madness," Shi Yao said. Yi Xian also knew the seriousness of this matter. It wasn't that he didn't want to help Lu Bai, but the memories of the two lives collided with each other. Lu Bai had to overcome this difficulty by himself. Outsiders couldn't help him. Boom! Suddenly, something happened that shocked Yi Xian. An extremely terrifying death chi appeared on Lu Bai's body. His body was surrounded by the forbidden death light, and his whole body calmed down at this moment. Only his eyes were as red as blood. How is this possible? Yi Xian roared in horror. He couldn't believe the scene in front of him. Not to mention Yi Xian, even Shi Yao and Taitsong couldn't keep calm and looked at Lu Bai in horror. The forbidden death light was the product of a forbidden character's failure. How could a forbidden character's power appear on a forbidden character's body? This was simply a fantasy story, and it was simply impossible to believe. Brother Yi, be careful of samsara. In the next moment, without waiting for Yi Xian's shocked thoughts to return, Lu Bai spoke in a hoarse voice with difficulty. He trembled as he pointed at the sky, and then strangely disappeared. Only a strand of death aura remained at the location where he disappeared, and then it slowly dissipated. Brother Bai? Absolute beginning. Yi Xian roared in shock. He couldn't figure out what had happened to Lu Bai. Why did the death chi suddenly appear? Why did it suddenly disappear? Even a half-step eternal realm expert like him couldn't detect it. It was as if Lu Bai had never existed in this world. How could this be? What happened? Strange. Shocking. He couldn't understand. Yi Xian was unable to calm down. It was all because of Lu Bai's sudden disappearance, and the death light on his body, that he was completely confused. Be careful of reincarnation? Yi Xian's eyes trembled slightly. These were the words that Lu Bai had left him before he disappeared. But what had happened to Lu Bai? What had happened to him? No one could explain this strange scene. Even Yi Xian, a half-step eternal expert, couldn't explain what had just happened. Big brother, where did Taichu go? Taitsong looked at Yi Xian in shock. No idea. With Yi Xian's current cultivation base, he could perceive the entire chaotic universe, but he couldn't sense Lu Bai's aura. It was as if Lu Bai had turned into air and no longer existed in the chaotic universe. Somehow an ominous feeling attacked Yi Xian. This ominous feeling made his heart tremble, but he couldn't figure out the reason. Why did Lu Bai disappear? Where did he go? What was with the death ray on his body? Great questions appeared in Yi Xian's mind, but he couldn't find any clues. Suddenly, Yi Xian's expression froze. He suddenly realized that he had forgotten something. Something that he had almost forgotten. Back then, when Lu Bai fell into a deep sleep, a terrifying forbidden death ray burst out from his body. He had even found several supreme experts, including the ancestor of all beasts, in hopes of waking Lu Bai up. Now that Yi Xian suddenly recalled this matter, another great question appeared in his mind. Lu Bai was Taichu's reincarnation to begin with. He wasn't a forbidden dead person at all. He was a true powerhouse of heaven and earth, and there was no death ray on his body at all. But why had the forbidden death ray appeared when Lu Bai fell into a deep sleep? When this question appeared, Yi Xian was completely dumbfounded. It must be known that Lu Bai didn't have the eternal dream. Yi Xian could use the eternal dream to simulate the forbidden death ray, but Lu Bai didn't have this ability. Fog. An enormous fog was placed in front of Yi Xian, making it impossible for him to see the true nature of the fog. You two can focus on your cultivation for now. I have a plan for this. Yi Xian slowly exhaled a turbid breath, gave a simple warning to the two, and then strode away. However, his expression was extremely solemn, because he was recalling everything about Lu Bai, every little thing that happened to him. The more Yi Xian thought about it, the more he felt that things were strange. Yi Xian returned to the imperial palace. He didn't walk out for a full 10,000 years, thinking hard about what happened to Lu Bai. Unfortunately, Yi Xian still couldn't find the answer. Until one day 10,000 years later, he finally walked out of the imperial palace to find the last supreme expert. He could only put the matter of Lu Bai aside for the time being. On the other side, Abyss sat cross-legged in the void, a dark reincarnation spinning above his head. That extremely terrifying aura was bursting out. Obviously, he was comprehending the true essence of the eternal realm, and wanted to step into this realm before Yi Xian. Barf. Abruptly, Abyss spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body withered, and he roared unwillingly, causing the entire void to rumble and shake. I failed again. Is it really difficult to step into the eternal realm? Abyss roared unwillingly. In order to surpass Yi Xian, he worked hard to raise the dark reincarnation to a new level, and truly step into the eternal realm. Unfortunately, even though Abyss had the aptitude and talent of the eternal realm, he still failed at the last half step, and couldn't step into the eternal realm. Abyss, don't be impatient. There are still more than 1 billion years before reincarnation extermination. Prison comforted him softly. Yeah, even you can't step into the eternal realm. With Desolation's aptitude, it's even more impossible. Tu also comforted him. What do you know? Abyss roared coldly, and his eyes were abnormally terrifying. He said, although Desolation's aptitude and talent are not as good as mine, he has great perseverance. I'm not as good as him in this aspect. This guy must be looking for an opportunity to break through the eternal realm. If he steps into the eternal realm first, I'll really lose to him. In the face of Abyss' uncontrollable roar, the two of them looked extremely solemn. They could feel the pressure brought by Yi Xian. He walked out of the training hall. Suddenly, Abyss' eyes pierced through the void and saw Yi Xian leaving the imperial palace and entering the Grand Central region. Seems like he's looking for an opportunity to combine the 3 worlds. Seems like I have to take action too. Abyss suddenly stood up and took a step forward. He disappeared from the void and entered the Grand Central region. Chapter 1950. With a single thought, heaven and earth would know. With a single thought, everything would know. On the vast land, Yi Xian walked like a mortal, but under the cover of his divine soul, he could sense the entire chaotic universe. He was looking for someone, the last supreme expert. With his current cultivation and realm, even an ant in the other corner of the universe could not escape his perception. In the Great Shiyuan region? The next moment Yi Xian was stunned. He felt an aura that was faintly compatible with the chaotic universe. The source of this aura was in the western region, which made Yi Xian a little puzzled. Logically speaking, the last supreme expert should be in the central region, after the opening of the 12 yuans, for 100 million years. He did not expect it to be in the border of the western region. Yi Xian stepped into the sky and moved the heaven and earth. The next moment, he appeared in the Great Shiyuan region. The chaotic world was divided into 5 regions, and the most prosperous one was naturally the central region. The other 4 regions could not be compared with the central region. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the sky above the western region. He was calmly feeling the aura of the last supreme expert. The next moment, his figure changed, and he disappeared into the sky again. This was a desolate mountain. The whole mountain was dark and red. Terrible heat waves were emitted from the mountain, and the world was filled with the pungent smell of sulfur. This was a volcano that towered into the sky. The crater of the volcano was illuminated by flames. From time to time, it rolled violently and spewed terrible magma, scorching the world. As soon as Yi Xian appeared here, he saw a young man climbing on the mountain. The young man carried a bamboo basket on his back and jumped between the mountains, picking fire-glossy mushrooms. His skin was copper, his body was strong, and there was a maturity between his eyebrows that did not match his age. Interesting, the last supreme expert is a young man. The 12 yuans have been open for 100 million years, but he has not stepped on the path of cultivation. Yi Xian murmured in surprise. Since Yi Xian had found the person he was looking for, he did not want to waste time. He stepped out and appeared beside the young man. "Little guy, what's your name?" Yi Xian's sudden appearance caused the youth's expression to change. He brandished the hatchet in his hand and slashed towards Yi Xian. Judging from his posture, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. So decisive at such a young age. Not bad. Yi Xian didn't move. The young man froze in midair, looking at Yi Xian with a serious expression. His eyes were as fierce as a wolf's, but there was a hint of fear in them. The young man knew that he had encountered a cultivator. Otherwise, that saber strike just now would have been enough to kill him. Now that he couldn't move, it was obvious that the other party had cast a spell on him. "I am Ning Chuan. May I know who Senior is? Why are you making things difficult for me?" The young man Ning Chuan was neither servile nor overbearing. However, his grip on the hatchet was extremely tight. He looked at Yi Xian with a murderous look in his eyes. "Ning Chuan." Yi Xian nodded and praised. "Good name. Are you willing to take me as your master?" "Take you as my master?" Ning Chuan was startled. Then he slowly shook his head and said, "I've never believed in things like free lunches falling from the sky. Senior, what is your goal? Just tell me." "A clear mind, meticulous thinking, and vicious and merciless. You are indeed a promising talent." Just now, Yi Xian had only felt that this young man was a courageous person, and hadn't been surprised. But now, Yi Xian began to admire this young man. He was only in his teens, but his mind was already so meticulous. It was indeed commendable. This also reminded Yi Xian of himself in his youth. "I can train you to become a paragon of the 12 periods, and you only need to find one thing for me. This is the deal between us." Yi Xian went straight to the point. "Paragon?" Ning Chuan was startled. Then, he looked at Yi Xian with an extremely strange expression. Although he didn't know any cultivation techniques, he knew a lot. He also knew that every period had a paragon. But now, a person had suddenly appeared and said that he would train him to become a paragon, and the price was to find one thing for him. To Ning Chuan, this was a bit of a fantasy. "Why should I believe you?" Ning Chuan looked at Yi Xian with a guarded expression. His eyes were filled with deep disbelief. Yi Xian smiled. He didn't explain. When he waved his sleeves, the world distorted terrifyingly. The Tongtian volcano, which was originally barren, actually glowed with vitality. a towering mountain appeared. Such a method instantly stunned Ning Chuan. He couldn't believe his eyes. Now are you willing to take me as your master? Yi Xian asked. Thump. Without any nonsense, Ning Chuan's thoughts turned. He directly knelt down and kowtowed to Yi Xian. In the face of such a powerful cultivator, not to mention whether he was lying to him, just this ability alone was beyond his reach. Ning Chuan naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Disciple greets master. Suddenly, before Ning Chuan could take him as his master, a cold voice rang in the world. There's no benefit in taking him as your master. Kid, why don't you take me as your master? A terrifying dark abyss covered the sky. A dark figure walked out from the abyss. It was Abyss, who was also at the half-step eternal realm. The arrival of Abyss made Yi Xian frown. However, if he could find the last paragon, Abyss could naturally find it too. Abyss stepped down from the sky and helped Ning Chuan up. He casually threw a pill to the young man and said, "This pill is called the God Abyss pill. After you take it, you can reach the immortal realm. As long as you take me as your master, I can open the 9 heavenly gates for you in 10 years, and make you an paragon in 1,000 years." Abyss didn't do anything. Once he did, it was a big deal. He even looked at Yi Xian with disdain. It was as if he was telling Yi Xian that he wanted this kid. Yi Xian couldn't win against him. Immortal realm? Ning Chuan was stunned. He looked at the two of them in shock. He held the pill in his hand and looked hesitant. Although Ning Chuan was only a teenager, he was terrifyingly mature. The two people who suddenly appeared in front of him must have an unimaginable background. Without hesitation, Ning Chuan put the pill into his mouth. It wasn't that he trusted Abyss, but he believed that with their background, they didn't need to go through so much trouble to harm him. After all, he was just an ant. Ning Chuan had just taken the pill, and his body exploded with a terrifying black flame. The flame burned through the sky as if it could burn everything. Abyss wasn't bragging. A mere pill could really make Ning Chuan an immortal realm and open a heavenly gate. You're spoiling things by spoiling them. This won't do him any good. Yi Xian frowned. Ha! Abyss sneered and retorted. Paragon is his limit. Do you expect him to open the 12 heavenly gates and reach the heaven-defying realm? Chapter 1951. After saying that, Abyss looked back at Ning Chuan and said, "Boy, you've taken the pill. Now kowtow and acknowledge me as your master." "Thank you for the pill, senior. But I've never said that I want to acknowledge you as my master." Ning Chuan rolled his eyes and replied in a neither haughty nor humble tone. "Do you want to die?" No one dared to refuse Abyss. Now that he was rejected by a boy, Abyss's aura turned cold. His pair of abyss-like eyes made the boy take a few steps back in fear. "He's just a kid. You've scared him." "Buzz!" Yi Xian waved his hand to disperse Abyss's aura, which made Ning Chuan gasp for breath. He almost thought that he was going to die in the hands of this terrifying man. "Desolate. I'll definitely take him as my disciple," Abyss said coldly. "First, I want to correct your mistake. Desolate is my name in my previous life. In this life, my name is Yi Xian. I hope you won't call me by the wrong name again. Second, you're not looking for an opportunity to break through the eternal realm. Instead, you're here to cause trouble for me. You really deserve to die." "What a joke," Abyss retorted. "If you can take him, why can't I?" Looking at Abyss's cold and arrogant expression, Yi Xian really wanted to kill him. However, they were both half-step eternal realm experts. Even if he could defeat Abyss, he would be weakened and couldn't kill him at all. The previous battle between the two had proved everything. Therefore, Yi Xian couldn't do anything to Abyss. "Ning Chuan, let me ask you, who do you want to acknowledge as your master?" Yi Xian ignored Abyss and asked the boy. "This?" Ning Chuan's face was heavy. He knew that no matter who he chose, he would offend the other person. This was not the result he wanted. Ning Chuan is grateful for the two seniors' kindness. However, this matter really makes things difficult for me. If the two seniors are sincere, can you give me some time to consider before giving an answer? Ning Chuan rolled his eyes and said, "Who were Yi Xian and Abyss?" He could tell what the young man was thinking at a glance. It was obvious that the young man didn't want to offend anyone, and he didn't want to miss this great opportunity either. But Yi Xian and Abyss didn't think much of it. After all, the so-called apprenticeship was nothing to Yi Xian. He just wanted to use the boy to find the last cauldron. As for Abyss, his idea was even simpler. Before he found a way to break through the eternal realm, he would never let Yi Xian walk ahead of him. This was also the reason why he had to compete with Yi Xian for a disciple. Something interesting happened. Two dignified half-step eternal realm experts, two peak experts of the eternal universe, accompanied a young man every day and taught him the Tao of cultivation. If this matter were to spread out, who knew how many people would be envious of Ning Chuan? They would want nothing more than to replace him. Kid, my 9 tribulations heaven abyss technique is invincible throughout the ages. You have to comprehend it carefully. In front of a waterfall, huge waves rumbled. On a blue stone next to the waterfall, Abyss was teaching, and Ning Chuan was listening attentively. Yi Xian stood alone, looking at Abyss's pestering indifferently. He didn't expect Abyss to teach his 9 tribulations heaven abyss technique to the young man. Yi Xian and Abyss had a 3-point agreement. The two would take turns to teach the young man, until Ning Chuan became an omnipotent expert. At that time, he could choose who he wanted to take as his master. Of course, Yi Xian didn't really want to take him as a disciple, nor did he have any intention of teaching him the technique. His goal was to find the last cauldron through Ning Chuan. Time flew by like a white steed flitting by. With the 2 half-step eternal realm experts teaching him, Ning Chuan's cultivation increased day by day. Especially with Abyss's generosity, various pills and spirit essences made Ning Chuan's cultivation soar at a terrifying speed. In just a few hundred years, Ning Chuan had opened the 9 heavenly gates of the immortal realm, which was simply incredible in the eyes of ordinary cultivators. An ordinary cultivator might not be able to reach the 9 heavenly gates of the immortal realm in 1 yuan hui, but a mortal boy had done it in a few hundred years. Of course, this was all thanks to Abyss. Without the help of his pills, Ning Chuan wouldn't have succeeded even with his unparalleled aptitude and perseverance. Ning Chuan, you've opened the 9 heavenly gates. As long as you step into the half-step omnipotent realm, you'll be able to break through to the omnipotent realm and truly dominate the 12th yuan hui. Now, as long as you kneel down and kowtow to me, I'll let you become a half-step omnipotent realm expert and help you become the omnipotent ruler of the 12th yuan hui. Green mountains and clear waters, willow trees rustled gently under an ancient pine tree. Abyss was brainwashing Ning Chuan and explaining how powerful he was. Unfortunately, Ning Chuan was unmoved. He wasn't moved by Abyss's words at all. Instead, he looked hopefully at Yi Xian. After experiencing the teachings of 2 half-step eternal realm experts for hundreds of years, Ning Chuan was no longer the ignorant boy he used to be. He knew what the highest realm of cultivators looked like. Once upon a time, the omnipotent realm was a realm he didn't dare to dream of. However, after cultivating with Yi Xian and Abyss for hundreds of years, he was no longer satisfied with the omnipotent realm. According to Yi Xian's explanation, the 9 heavenly gates was an incomplete cultivation path. Only by opening the 12 heavenly gates and combining them to reach the heaven-defying realm could one be considered to have truly stepped into the palace of cultivation. And this was just the beginning. Even if one stepped into the heaven-defying realm, they still needed to open the 9 heaven-shocking transformations before they could peek into the omnipotent realm of eternity. When Ning Chuan learned that both of them were half-step eternal realm experts, his ambition grew infinitely. He hoped to become someone like Yi Xian and Abyss. Unfortunately, according to Yi Xian and Abyss, the chaotic universe of the future was limited to the heaven-defying transformation. Moreover, even opening the 10th heavenly gate was as difficult as ascending to heaven, let alone the heaven-defying transformation. At this moment, Abyss was bewitching Ning Chuan, but Ning Chuan's mind was on opening the 10th heaven gate. Moreover, he knew that Yi Xian was very experienced in this aspect, because he'd opened the 12 heaven gates in the later Chaos verse, and even cultivated to the half-step eternal realm. Boy, did you hear what I said? Abyss's face turned cold. He found that Ning Chuan was absent-minded, which immediately made him angry. Senior, Ning Chuan doesn't want to become an omnipotent realm expert. I only want to open the 10th heavenly gate and follow in the footsteps of the two seniors, Ning Chuan said solemnly. Impossible, Abyss scolded coldly. There's no yuan qi of heaven and earth in this era. Even if you were in the 3 strongest eras, your aptitude would only reach the heaven-defying realm at most. Ning Chuan, I know you're ambitious, but I advise you to be content with what you have. Otherwise, you'll end up miserable, Yi Xian said faintly, giving him a warning. Yi Xian was really impatient. If it weren't for the last cauldron, he would have left long ago. But since he couldn't find the cauldron, he could only follow Ning Chuan temporarily. Seniors, I don't dare to dream of becoming a half-step eternal realm expert, but I want to become an omnipotent realm expert. I hope you can help me. One had to admit that Ning Chuan was not only ambitious, but also bold. When he found that Yi Xian and Abyss wouldn't harm him, he begged. Omnipotent realm expert? Yi Xian smiled. His smile was very cold as he said, in this era, a heaven-defying change is the limit. You're just wishful thinking. I'll give you 3 days to think about it. You'd better become an omnipotent realm expert of the 12th period as soon as possible. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Yi Xian flicked his sleeve, then took a step forward and disappeared. Boy, think carefully. As long as you acknowledge me as your master, even if he wants to kill you, I can guarantee your safety. Abyss said coldly before disappearing as well. Although Ning Chuan's aptitude was good, he was nothing in the eyes of Abyss. He was only doing this to ruin Yi Xian's plan. Damn it! Watching the two disappear, Ning Chuan muttered with a gloomy face and slammed his fists on the ground. He was really unwilling to become an omnipotent realm expert. After witnessing the strength of the two, he deeply understood how weak the so-called omnipotent realm expert was in front of them. I can't accept it. Actually, I can help you open the 10th gate of heaven, and even help you break through to the heaven-defying realm. Even the 9 transformations shocking heavens is not impossible. If you are willing, I can even make you become someone like them, truly on the same level as them. Suddenly, a light voice rang in Ning Chuan's ears. This shocked him, and he looked for the source of the voice. Chapter 1952. Who is it? Who's talking to me? Ning Chuan looked around in horror, but he couldn't find the source of the voice. Go east for 30,000 miles and you'll see me. The inexplicable voice came again. This time, Ning Chuan knew it wasn't an illusion. His face was gloomy, and he didn't know if he should believe the mysterious person who suddenly appeared. However, Ning Chuan didn't hesitate for long. He took a step forward and soared into the sky, heading east for 30,000 miles. Ning Chuan naturally wouldn't believe a stranger's words, but he wasn't willing to become an omnipotent. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, he had to try. East 30,000 miles away, waves rose and fell in a surging river. Willows swayed with the wind on both sides of the river. The surging waves were crystal clear, and a figure was standing on the shore. The figure stood with his hands behind his back. A mysterious fog covered his body, making it impossible to see his face, let alone whether he was a man or a woman. Who are you? As soon as Ning Chuan arrived at this place, his mind trembled fiercely, because the illusory figure standing in front of him actually gave him an extremely unreal feeling. The person was standing in front of him, but Ning Chuan couldn't feel his existence. He was like a mass of air, and he couldn't capture any trace of his existence at all. Ning Chuan. The mysterious person turned around slowly. His eyes were mysterious and unfathomable through the void. His eyes were calm and quiet, without the slightest ripple. Who the hell are you? For some reason, Ning Chuan's heart beat faster. He was deeply in awe when facing Yi Xian and Abyss, but facing this mysterious person who suddenly appeared, he was silently afraid. It was as if the existence of this person could determine his life and death. It wasn't just the suppression of strength, but the difference in the level of life. If you want, you can call me you, said the mysterious person. You? Ning Chuan was shocked. 1 or 2 words for a name usually appeared in the name of an absolute powerhouse. Was this person in front of him also an absolute powerhouse, or a half-step eternal realm expert? You said you can help me open the 10th gate of heaven, and let me be on an equal footing with those two. Is that true? Ning Chuan's eyes turned. Of course, said Yu. Why are you helping me? Ning Chuan asked in a low voice. He never believed that a pie would fall from the sky. A mysterious person who appeared out of nowhere was willing to help him. He would never believe that the other party had no ulterior motives. You don't need to know why I'm helping you. Zhou was calm and emotionless. His entire being was in a state of stillness. Wang. Zhou raised his 5 fingers, and a void fog revolved in his palm. When the void fog dissipated, a small cauldron appeared. This cauldron contains a great mystery. It is the key to opening the 10th gate of heaven. It can also allow you to break through the shackles of this era and truly catch up to those two. As Zhou spoke, he gave the small cauldron to Ning Chuan. This caused Ning Chuan to hold the small cauldron in a daze. But you have to remember that this cauldron is related to whether you can enter the heaven-defying realm and whether you can reach the half-step eternal realm in the future. If you lose this cauldron, you will never have the chance to become an existence like those two. Remember. Zhou exhorted. Thank you, Senior. Ning Chuan hurriedly bowed and put away the small cauldron with extreme care. They're here. I'm leaving. Zhou spoke faintly. Then, he turned into a wisp of green smoke and disappeared. It was as though he had never been there, and no one could sense that he had been there. Wang. Heaven and earth shifted, and a figure appeared. Yi Xian and Zhou appeared at the same time. Both of them frowned and looked at Ning Chuan. This caused Ning Chuan to be shocked. However, he was extremely shrewd. Although he was flustered, his face remained calm and composed. What are you doing here? Zhou looked at Ning Chuan coldly with a slightly strange expression. I have a knot in my heart, so I wanted to come out for a walk. Ning Chuan bowed and answered. Humph. Zhou snorted coldly and said, Then you have to consider carefully. Do you want to be my disciple and become an omnipotent expert? Ning Chuan is grateful for your guidance over the years. However, Ning Chuan doesn't belong to the omnipotent expert. Forgive me for not being able to be your disciple. Today, I can only bid farewell to both of you. Ning Chuan's words were neither servile nor overbearing. He bowed 3 times to the two of them, and then strode away. You're courting death. Zhou was furious. No one had ever dared to reject him like this. This made him want to kill Ning Chuan. He wanted to kill Ning Chuan with one slap. Let him go. Suddenly, before Zhou could do anything, Yi Xian stopped Zhou. This made Zhou change his expression. Just as he was about to scold Yi Xian, he saw Yi Xian's solemn expression. Zhou was shocked. Then he fell silent. The two of them watched Ning Chuan leave and didn't stop him. What did you feel? Zhou had already calmed down. He asked softly. Didn't you feel it? Yi Xian looked at this place, and his expression turned solemn. It was as if he was looking for something. Zhou's expression changed slightly. Then he nodded. After Yi Xian's reminder, he did feel that something was wrong. Both of them were old antiques who had lived for countless years. Ning Chuan's performance was too calm. Obviously, something unpredictable had happened to him. Although Ning Chuan looked respectful and didn't reveal any flaws, the calmer he looked, the more suspicious he was. Moreover, just now this place was terrifyingly quiet. It was so quiet that there wasn't a single sound. He appeared. Zhou looked at Yi Xian with a solemn expression. When he said this, his expression was unusually solemn. From the day they stepped into the land of extinction, both of them knew that there was a transcendent existence above the eternal universe. However, neither of them had seen this person before. If anyone had seen this person, it was Zhou who had seen this person's back. However, this memory was extremely blurry for Yi Xian. A large part of Zhou's memory in the Gate of Reincarnation seemed to have been erased. Except for some fragmented memories, even Yi Xian didn't know anything about this person, let alone what kind of existence he was. However, there was one thing that Yi Xian was sure of. This person was at least in the eternal realm. He was definitely above Zhou and Zhou. Follow him. Yi Xian said briefly. The two of them looked at each other and disappeared into the void. 300 million years. 300 million years had passed. Yi Xian and Zhou had been secretly observing Ning Chuan for 300 million years. However, Apart from cultivating every day, he didn't do anything unusual, let alone take out the small cauldron to comprehend. These 300 million years were long enough to make Abyss feel bored. However, Yi Xian waited patiently without the slightest bit of impatience. Chapter 1953. Because he believed that his intuition was right. Something must have happened to Ning Chuan. Although 300 million years had passed, Ning Chuan did not show any abnormalities. However, this was the biggest doubt in Yi Xian's eyes. Yi Xian actually admired Ning Chuan, because Ning Chuan was very similar to him. Whether it was scheming or means, Ning Chuan was almost exactly the same as he was when he was young. They were both vicious and merciless, decisive in killing, and unyielding in enduring silently. There was a saying that went, "The person who knows you the best, other than your enemy, is yourself." Since Ning Chuan's personality was similar to his, Ning Chuan would definitely be on guard. He would even hide for 300 million years without giving himself away. It's been 300 million years. This kid has been cultivating hard, but he still hasn't found a way to open the 10th heaven gate. I don't think there's any problem with him. Abyss finally lost his patience. Wait, Yi Xian only said one word. He hid in the void and looked down at Ning Chuan. In terms of patience, both Abyss and Ning Chuan were much worse than the others. Another 100 million years passed. Abyss was almost about to give up. He even wanted to leave this place to comprehend the opportunity to enter the eternal realm. After all, the great calamity of reincarnation was approaching. He did not want to waste time here. Unfortunately, Yi Xian pulled him back and stopped him from leaving. He continued to let Abyss wait with him. During this period, the strongest of the 12th Yuanhui still did not appear. This was something that had never happened before. The new Yuanhui had been open for more than 500 million years. It was more than half of the time, but no new strongest had appeared. In a gloomy ancient cave, Ning Chuan sat cross-legged and breathed. He slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. At this moment his eyes slowly opened. A strange look flashed across his eyes. It's about time, right? Ning Chuan muttered to himself. He had endured for a full 400 million years in order to prevent himself from revealing any flaws and avoid being secretly monitored by Yi Xian and the other two. After 400 million years, Ning Chuan believed that the two should have left. He should be safe now. However, for the sake of caution, Ning Chuan still laid down layers upon layers of formations, not daring to be careless in the slightest. Even though he had endured for 400 million years, he still did not feel at ease. Unfortunately, everything he did fell into Yi Xian's eyes. Abyss's face was cold, and his eyes were filled with shame and anger. If Yi Xian had not asked him to stay, he might have really fallen for this brat's trick. Now that he saw Ning Chuan lay down layers upon layers of arrays, it was clear that there was something wrong with him. Wang! A small cauldron appeared in Ning Chuan's hand, causing him to look at it with infatuation. He didn't dare to be negligent, and immediately sat down cross-legged to comprehend the mysteries of the small cauldron in his hand. As expected, it's in his hands. Yi Xian smiled coldly. He didn't seem to do anything, but he took a step forward and came to Ning Chuan's side. Abyss naturally followed closely behind. Who? The sudden intrusion caused Ning Chuan's expression to change drastically. He quickly put away the small cauldron and looked at Yi Xian and Jian Wushuang in shock. It's you. Ning Chuan's face was ashen. He never thought that he would be discovered by the two of them after hiding for 400 million years. Where is the person who gave you the small cauldron? Yi Xian didn't take the small cauldron away immediately. Instead, he looked at Ning Chuan gloomily. In fact, from the beginning, Yi Xian could have suppressed Ning Chuan directly when he discovered that there was something wrong with Ning Chuan. However, Yi Xian didn't do that because he wasn't sure if there was anything wrong with Ning Chuan. Now that Ning Chuan took out the small cauldron, Yi Xian was finally certain. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Ning Chuan was stubborn. Even at this moment, he was still thinking of a way to escape. He held the small cauldron tightly in his hand and had no intention of handing it over to Yi Xian. You're very ambitious. You're very similar to me when I was young. It's a pity that you don't know your place. You've forgotten that you're just a chess piece. As a chess piece, you have to have the consciousness of a chess piece, Yi Xian said coldly. Why waste your breath on him? Just kill him. Boom. Yuan had long wanted to kill Ningchuan. His 5 fingers slapped towards Ningchuan. The dark light of reincarnation appeared, and it was determined to destroy Ningchuan's body and soul. Buzz! Suddenly, a fog appeared in front of Ningchuan. Yuan's attack didn't succeed in the end. After a terrifying explosion, the cave residence that they were in shattered. After the dust filled the sky, Yi Xian and Abyss stood side by side. A figure shrouded in mist appeared in front of the two of them. You finally appeared, Yi Xian said faintly and looked straight at the figure. Yuan's expression was cold, and he was also looking at the person. How should we address you? Yuan asked coldly. Obviously, he was just pretending to be angry. In fact, his real purpose was to lure out the person behind Ningchuan. You can call me you. You, Yi Xian murmured and then looked up at you. You should be in the gate of reincarnation, but now you're in front of us. It seems that you're afraid. You didn't make a sound. He only indifferently looked at Yi Xian and Abyss. His figure that was covered by the void distorted and disappeared, so much so that Yi Xian and Abyss weren't able to detect his existence. The universe rotates and all things circulate. This is destiny. Why do you two have to go against it? You said. I don't care if you're in the gate of reincarnation, or some bullshit eternal will of the universe. Since you dare to appear here today, don't go back alive. Rumble. Dark reincarnation, Tian Yuan across the sky. Yuan didn't move, but once he moved it was earth-shattering. He erupted with a terrifying power. His half-step eternal realm cultivation base was terrifying to the extreme. Boom. Yuan didn't waste any words. He threw a punch at you, and the terrifying power of the dark reincarnation emerged. This punch was so terrifying that it could even destroy the entire chaotic universe. But in the next moment, something strange happened. The power of Abyss's punch was disappearing. When it arrived in front of Ian, it was all gone. Huh? Yuan's expression changed. Only he knew how terrifying his attack was. Even Yi Xian wouldn't dare to take it head-on. However, it was actually completely useless before Ian. This simply caused him to feel disbelief, and an extremely great feeling of frustration arose in his heart. Don't be fooled by him. He's just a will. He doesn't have a physical body at all. Suddenly Yi Xian roared, waking Yuan up. He realized that Yu was just as Yi Xian said. Not only could he not sense his existence, but Yu also didn't show any power. He was just a wisp of illusory will. I see. Yuan was enlightened. Chapter 1954. Abyss didn't realize that Yi Xian had unknowingly taken the lead, and he was also unknowingly acting according to Yi Xian's thoughts. This was a subtle change that even Abyss himself didn't notice. Even his hatred for Yi Xian had unknowingly faded. Perhaps it was because of Yi Xian's charisma, or perhaps it was because of the arrival of the Great Calamity, but Abyss felt that he was in the same boat. But in any case, Abyss's hostility towards Yi Xian wasn't as great as before. Even he himself didn't notice this. At this moment, Yi Xian and Abyss stood side by side, as if they had the same enemy. Ningchuan's expression was uncertain as he quietly retreated. He couldn't afford to offend any of the 3 people in front of him. At this moment, Yi Xian had discovered his thoughts. He no longer had any extravagant hopes. He just wanted to protect his own life. From birth to death, from beginning to end, this is the law of all things in the world. Both of you have comprehended the profound meaning of reincarnation, so you should understand this principle. Abyss was emotionless, as if he was describing the true meaning of all things in the world. You talk too much nonsense. Ever since I was born, I don't believe in the world or the universe. I only believe in myself, Abyss said coldly. You're just a strand of his will. Do you think you can stop us? Yi Xian strolled forward, until he came in front of Abyss. His pair of Dharma eyes rotated, trying to see through the true body behind this strand of will. Unfortunately, Abyss was shrouded in a void fog. Even if Yi Xian opened his Dharma eyes, he couldn't see through it. There was an inexplicable force that blocked his probing. Why don't we make a deal? Abyss said. Huh? Yi Xian laughed. His laughter was very strange. Interesting. A mighty existence above the eternal universe is willing to make a deal with the two of us. Let's hear it. The deal is very simple. As long as you let this chaotic universe end, I'll give you the method to step into the eternal realm. From then on, the two of you won't be restricted by the universe. Isn't this what you want? Abyss said calmly. Hiss. As soon as Zhou finished speaking, Abyss sucked in a breath of cold air. Not being restricted by the eternal universe was the same as not saying anything to him, because he and Yi Xian were undying to begin with. However, the method to enter the eternal realm was an irresistible temptation for him and Yi Xian. What if we don't agree? Yi Xian's eyes were cold. Yi Xian, you? Abyss frowned. He didn't know why Yi Xian refused, but he saw Yi Xian shake his head. That calmed Abyss down. That's right, the existence behind the gate of reincarnation was a supreme figure that surpassed the eternal universe. How could he be so kind as to give them the method to break into eternity? If you don't agree, then all I have to do is seal the two of you for eternity. This is something even more painful than death. Zhou still spoke calmly. You think you can do that? Yi Xian smiled coldly. You're just his will. You don't have any power or a physical body. Do you really think the two of us are made of clay? Yi Xian paused for a moment and said, if I'm not wrong, his true body can't descend at all. That's why he sent a will here, right? As Yi Xian said that, Zhou, who had been calm all this time, paused for a moment before calming down again. Although this trace of abnormality disappeared in a flash, it was still captured by Yi Xian. This caused Yi Xian's worried heart to relax. Yi Xian was indeed worried. He was worried that the person from the gate of reincarnation would appear. Yi Xian was certain that even if he and Abyss joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for that person. However, Yi Xian was finally certain that the mysterious existence of the gate of reincarnation definitely had some scruples and couldn't descend into the chaotic universe. Although I can't descend with my true body, it's not difficult for me to seal the two of you. Woo woo woo. Suddenly, something shocking happened. The eternal firmament distorted, and the starry universe was vanishing. Zhou's entire body was glowing. The void fog on his body filled the sky and gradually turned into a phantom that strangely fused into Ning Chuan's glabella. Ah! Ning Chuan screamed. The screams from the private message crack were deafening, but his body was undergoing an extremely terrifying change. Bang! 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 One heaven door after another opened as he screamed in pain. The 9 heaven doors he had opened appeared, but it wasn't over. The 10th heaven door, the 11th heaven door, the 12th heaven door. The 12 heaven doors merged into one. Almost in a flash, Ning Chuan opened the 12 heaven doors in succession, before finally merging into one. Boom! In the next moment, an extremely terrifying aura burst out. Ning Chuan easily broke through to the heaven-defying realm, and his aura was still increasing at a terrifying rate. Heaven-defying first transformation. Heaven-defying second transformation. Heaven-defying third transformation. Heaven-defying 9th transformation. Boom! It shocked the heavens and the earth. In just a dozen breaths, Ning Chuan had undergone 9 shocking transformations. The shocking aura was simply terrifying. But it was just the beginning. Ning Chuan's aura was still increasing. His entire body was glowing. It was a kind of light that Yi Xian and Yuan had never seen before. The light of Great Tao. It was definitely the light of Great Tao. It was filled with the supreme profound meaning of the eternal world, and encompassed all the laws of the universe. Buzz! Ning Chuan's body changed. The light of Great Tao surrounded him. He stepped into the half-step eternal realm. The terrifying light of Great Tao lingered around him, and even affected the operation of the entire chaotic universe. Are you kidding me? Yuan roared in horror. He stared at Ning Chuan. This kid had only cultivated for a few hundred years. How could he become a half-step eternal realm expert in such a short time? He's not Ning Chuan. That kid is dead. Although Yi Xian was similarly shocked, he still maintained his calm, and loudly reminded the abyss. Obviously, Ian had just fused with Ning Chuan's body. He had occupied Ning Chuan's body, and then used the great Tao of heaven and earth to elevate himself to the half-step eternal realm. The light of great Tao, the power of the universe. At this moment Ning Chuan knew he should be called Ian. After Ian had seized Ning Chuan's body, the greedy and ambitious kid's soul had collapsed and died. Ian was emotionless. His eyes were emotionless. He seemed to be the eternal universe. The immense pressure made Yi Xian and Yuan tremble. They were both at the half-step eternal realm, but Ian was unprecedentedly powerful. Even Yi Xian and Yuan were terrified. Strong. Too strong. He was so strong that Yi Xian and Yuan felt heavy. A sense of fear rose in their hearts. Chapter 1955. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Even if he's half-step eternal realm, you and I are still in the same realm. How can he give us such a terrible pressure? Abyss roared in shock and anger. His body has turned into the universe, invincible, and the origin of great Tao has appeared. We're in trouble, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Yi Xian understood with just a glance. This Ian was truly terrifying. It was worthy of being the will of that person. It merely occupied Ning Chuan's body, and used it as a medium to condense the true meaning of the great Tao, encompassing the power of the entire eternal universe for its own use. At this moment, Yi Xian and Abyss were facing Ian. It would be better to say that they were facing the power of the entire eternal universe. That was why they felt such a terrifying pressure, and even felt fear in their hearts. However, this little fear couldn't really affect them. After all, they had experienced many dangers along the way, and had long been determined to fight against the great calamity of the entire eternal universe. Suppress. Zhou raised his 5 fingers, causing the ancient heavens to roil. The peerless power of the great Tao spread out and suppressed Yi Xian and Yi Xian. I'll take you on. Yi Xian took the lead as the eternal reincarnation fist blasted out in a terrifying manner. The 3 realms technique and Tao surged endlessly within his body, converging into a terrifying 3-colored fist light that smashed towards the power of the great Tao. Bang! Heaven and earth exploded. The sun, moon, and stars lost their color. A terrible crack appeared in the sky, and the burst of power affected the entire chaotic universe. Open! The two's attack could destroy the entire chaotic universe. Zhou frowned slightly. When his sleeves rolled up, he opened up a void world and sucked the 3 of them in. Not to mention that you can condense the power of great Tao and mobilize the power of the entire eternal universe. It's still too early for you to suppress the 2 of us today. Yi Xian was also half-step eternal realm. The 3 realms technique and Tao turned into 3-colored light that flowed around his body. He crazily bombarded Zhou. Bang! 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 Yi Xian attacked ferociously, using both his fists and legs. This seemingly simple attack contained the most terrifying power. When one reached the half-step energy utilization realm, any spell or divine ability was just a minor Tao. Only the most fundamental power could hurt the opponent. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to be moving his fists and legs at the same time, but each of his moves contained the most ferocious might since the beginning of time. He was already going all out. On the other hand, Zhou's entire body was coiled by the glow of the Grand Tao, and he was completely emotionless. His palms had transformed into perfect circles that ceaselessly blocked Yi Xian's ferocious attacks. Bang! One strike. As Ian struck out, the light of the great Tao skyrocketed. Yi Xian was sent flying. The terrifying light of the great Tao exploded on Yi Xian's body, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. His flesh and blood exploded. He was no match for him. Yi Xian was no match for Zhou. The 2 fought for a long time. But in the end, Yi Xian was defeated. Although he was a half-step eternal, he still fell short when compared to Ian. Seal! Ian attacked mercilessly. The terrifying light of the great Tao transformed into a mysterious rune that wanted to seal Yi Xian within. Scram! At this critical moment, Abyss suddenly attacked. He transformed into a terrifying dark samsara, causing Zhou to freeze. The runes of the great Tao in his hand dissipated. Bang! 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 Abyss launched a terrifying attack and instantly clashed with Ian. Their figures intertwined, and the terrifying power continued to erupt. The entire world of nothingness was horribly cracking. But even Yi Xian was no match for Ian. Even though Abyss was on par with Yi Xian, he was still no match for Ian. Destroy him. Chi. In the next moment, Yi Xian returned to the battlefield. He chose to join forces with Abyss, because Yi Xian knew very well that if they didn't join forces, Ian would seal them. Rumble. 3 worlds laws and Daos. Dark Samsara. 2 half-step eternal laws and Daos bloomed at their limits. The two of them were originally enemies, not friends. But under the pressure of Ian, the two of them chose to join forces. This was the first time they had joined forces. Kill! Yi Xian roared. 3 world techniques and Daos intertwined. Terrifying fist radiance whizzed out. Samsara. Abyss roared fiercely. His 9 tribulations heaven abyss technique was pushed to the extreme. The fist radiance of Dark Samsara was equally ferocious and terrifying, facing the pincer attack of 2 half-step eternal realm experts. Although Ian was just a merciless will, he still felt the terrifying pressure. He retreated step by step, and was clearly at a disadvantage. Although Ian was stronger than Yi Xian and Abyss, he had to be cautious when facing the power of the two when they joined forces. Yi Xian and Abyss fought fiercely. They were almost suppressing Ian, and both of them were excited. However, even though Zhou was at a disadvantage, every single strike of his carried the terrifying light of the Great Tao. This kind of terrifying strength caused Yi Xian and Yuan to be unable to do anything to him, and they always returned without success. He has the power of the eternal universe and the power of the Great Tao. Although you and I seem to have the upper hand now, as time passes, we will still be defeated. Abyss secretly transmitted to Yi Xian, telling him the hidden dangers of this battle. Without needing Abyss to remind him, Yi Xian already knew the situation they were in. They couldn't do anything to each other, let alone kill each other. Let's run. Yi Xian continued to attack fiercely, but secretly transmitted to Abyss. Run! Abyss was stunned at first, and then he transmitted angrily, impossible. I've never run away since I was born. Even if I can't defeat him, I'll just die. Idiot! Yi Xian immediately cursed angrily. We're both half-step eternal realm experts. You and I are both immortal and indestructible. He can't kill us, but he can seal us forever. Do you really want to experience the pain of being sealed forever? A momentary failure is nothing. I've lost countless times in my life, but I've still managed to survive until now. I've killed all my enemies. You have to remember, only those who are alive will have the last laugh. Yi Xian's scolding made Abyss feel extremely complicated. He wanted to refute Yi Xian, but he couldn't because Yi Xian's words made sense. Put down your bullshit pride and self-esteem. It's the most useless thing. Yi Xian transmitted angrily. Yi Xian could feel his aura weakening. On the other hand, Ian had the support of the eternal universe and the power of the Great Tao. He was gradually fighting back. I'll listen to you, but how are we going to run? Where can we run to? Abyss finally compromised. At this moment, he also put down his so-called pride and dignity. However, he understood their situation. Even if they could escape, Ian had transformed into the universe. Even if they ran to the ends of the earth, he would find them. Chapter 1956. Idiot, are you confused? You and I are both half-step eternal realm cultivators. As long as we seal our cultivation in our bodies, no matter how powerful he is, he won't be able to find us, Yi Xian said coldly. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go now. Abyss sent Yi Xian a voice transmission, after knocking Zhou back with a punch. Help me do something first. Once it's done, we will leave this place immediately, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. What is it? Abyss was puzzled. What tricks did Yi Xian have up his sleeves at this time? Do you see the small cauldron beside him? Help me hold him back. Once I get the small cauldron, we will leave immediately. Yi Xian's eyes were gloomy as he stared at the small cauldron floating beside Zhou. Okay. Abyss agreed without any nonsense. Now that the two of them were in the same boat, they naturally had to advance and retreat together. Dark Samsara. Abyss unleashed all of his power. His entire body once again transformed into the Dark Samsara, and ruthlessly smashed towards Ian. This was Abyss's strongest attack. Even Zhou didn't dare to take it head-on, so he hurriedly dodged. But at this moment, Yi Xian turned into a wisp of green smoke and suddenly appeared beside Zhou. His 5 fingers reached for the small cauldron. Buzz! Suddenly there was a sudden change. Before Yi Xian could touch the small cauldron, a terrifying light of the great Tao rose in front of Zhou, preventing Yi Xian from taking the small cauldron. At the same time, Zhou raised his hand and slapped it towards Yi Xian's head, and the terrifying light of the great Tao appeared at the center of his palm. This strike was extremely terrifying, and if it were to hit, then Yi Xian would definitely explode into pieces. Break! In the face of Zhou's terrifying attack, Yi Xian made up his mind. With a ferocious expression, he ignored the other party's fatal attack. The 3-world technique and Tao gathered in his palm and shattered the light of the great Tao in front of Zhou. His 5 fingers had already grabbed the small cauldron. But this way, Yi Xian's head was completely exposed to Zhou's eyes. This attack was about to land on Yi Xian's head. One had to know that this attack could completely destroy Yi Xian's body and soul. Even if Yi Xian was half a step into the eternal realm, and could be said to be undying and indestructible, it would still take him an extremely long time to recover from such a blow. However, Yi Xian believed that Abyss would definitely block this attack. Sure enough, Yi Xian's intuition wasn't wrong. Just as this attack was about to shatter Yi Xian, Abyss loudly blocked in front of Yi Xian. He transformed into Dark Samsara and forcefully withstood this attack. Bang! However, this strike dissipated the Dark Samsara. Abyss spat out a mouthful of blood and reverted to his true form. Let's go! Yi Xian grabbed Abyss' body and forcefully fused the 3 realms technique and the Tao. The dazzling brilliance illuminated the entire world of nothingness and converged into the strongest attack in his life as it smashed towards you. Rumble! The void world exploded in a terrifying manner. The blinding light drowned out everything. Even Zhou was unable to detect the 2 of them. After the light dissipated, Ian looked around the world, but he couldn't find Yi Xian and Yi Xian. They actually escaped. Zhou was stunned as he looked up at the sky in a daze. A wisp of spiritual light floated out of his head. This state lasted for dozens of seconds before his dull expression returned to normal. As long as you dare appear again, you will definitely be sealed forever. Zhou took a step forward and disappeared between heaven and earth. Icebergs rose and fell as a vast sea of ice surged and roared. Cold winds howled between heaven and earth as heavy snow fell. Bang! A loud explosion rang out as one of the icebergs was blasted apart. As the ice fragments scattered, 2 figures appeared. Puff! Yi Xian and Abyss spat out a mouthful of blood at almost the same time. Then they fell heavily on the glacier, panting violently. Their faces were flushed and a little pale. This guy is terrifyingly strong. After dozens of seconds, Abyss muttered hatefully. He and Yi Xian had fought together, but they were no match for Zhou Donghuang. This was a humiliation to him. He has condensed the light of the great Tao and can mobilize the power of the eternal universe. Although we are both half-step eternal realm experts, we are still no match for him, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. The 2 of them had a brief conversation. Then, they sealed their cultivation in their bodies to prevent their aura from leaking out to avoid being detected by Zhou. Then they began to quickly heal their injuries. Fortunately, although the 2 of them had fled in defeat, they were half-step eternal realm experts after all. Their injuries healed extremely quickly. In just half a year, they had returned to their peak. At the top of the iceberg, the cold wind howled and snow fell from the sky. Yi Xian and Abyss stood side by side. Both of them were silent, and the atmosphere was slightly depressing. Are we going to hide here forever? Abyss said unwillingly. Without entering the eternal realm, you and I are no match for him, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. He is just a will. He has only occupied a body, yet he is already so terrifying. How strong is his real body? Abyss frowned. It's useless to talk about this now. The only thing we can do is for one of us to enter the eternal realm. Only then can we get out of this crisis, Yi Xian said solemnly. Do you have any ideas? Abyss had no clue about how to break into the eternal realm. He had studied hard for a long time, but he did not see the opportunity to break into the eternal realm. Buzz! Yi Xian flipped his hand, and the last small cauldron appeared. It was rotating in Yi Xian's palm, emitting a simple light. This heaven-breaking cauldron can help us break into the eternal realm? Seeing Yi Xian take out the small cauldron, Yuan's brows furrowed even more. He didn't think too highly of these 12 heaven-shattering cauldrons, because in the distant past, he had also gathered all of them. But to Abyss, the small cauldron was indestructible and contained some secret techniques. It had no other use. This is the key to open the gate of reincarnation. My previous life brought it out from the gate of reincarnation. It's not as simple as you think, Yi Xian said. Abyss was stunned and said, "You mean you can figure out the way to enter the eternal realm from the small cauldron?" "I don't know." Yi Xian shook his head. Even he was not sure if the last small cauldron could help him merge 3 lives into one. But Yi Xian was unwilling to give up without trying. Abyss. Yi Xian held the small cauldron in his hand and looked at Abyss solemnly. It was the first time he looked so serious, which made Abyss tense up. "Why do you look like that? You're not thinking of doing something to me again, are you?" Abyss frowned. He was not used to Yi Xian's current state. After all, he had been tricked by Yi Xian, and was afraid that Yi Xian would do something to him. "I don't want to talk nonsense. Although we're enemies, it's just a fight." Chapter 1957. Now that a strand of that guy's will has descended into the world, suppressing us to the point that we can't even raise our heads. I hope that during this closed-door cultivation, we can advance and retreat together. You and I can be honest with each other and comprehend the opportunity to step into eternity together. Yi Xian said solemnly. "You." Looking at Yi Xian's solemn expression, Abyss opened his mouth. He wanted to mock Yi Xian, but when he saw Yi Xian's serious expression, he didn't. Abyss was silent. He understood what Yi Xian meant. Yi Xian hoped that the two of them could work together to comprehend the opportunity to break into eternity. Obviously, Yi Xian couldn't comprehend it alone, and Abyss had no clue either. The best way was for the two of them to comprehend it together. One was a person with great perseverance who walked out of the 3-world law and Tao, while the other was a peerless figure of unparalleled talent. The two of them complemented each other. And it wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Okay. Abyss didn't hesitate for long. He nodded solemnly, knowing that now wasn't the time for Yi Xian to treat each other as enemies. Let's clap hands and swear that until we break into eternity, we won't plot against each other. Yi Xian raised his hand and looked at Abyss. Clap. As expected, the two of them clapped hands. This meant that the two of them had turned hostility into friendship for the sake of a common goal. On the other side, everything in the chaotic universe was in an uproar. The 12th paragon had finally appeared, and his name had spread throughout the chaotic universe. Zhou. That was the name of the last paragon. He didn't have a title, just the word Zhou. Although the last paragon had appeared, and the battle for the paragon of eternity had ended, all living beings didn't have much respect for the last paragon. Because in the last Yuan Hui, many great figures that had never existed since ancient times came into being one after another. Putting aside the fact that those taboo beings were even scarier than the utmost beings of the ancient times, there was also the appearance of those frightening existences. In front of these people, this final utmost being was as insignificant as an ant. But then something completely unexpected happened, something that shook the entire chaos-verse to the core. This final utmost being, Ian, had actually single-handedly suppressed and subdued the other 11 utmost beings. However, this wasn't the end of it. A large number of taboo figures were subdued by him one after another. Anyone who refused to submit to him was beaten to death in body and soul. Among the 11 strongest existences, there were many disciples of Yi Xian, as well as friends of Yi Xian. However, in front of you, all of them were powerless to resist and could only lower their heads. Facing the merciless suppression of Ian, all living beings were waiting for Yi Xian to appear. But in the end, they were disappointed. Yi Xian seemed to have evaporated from the world. Even when his friends and family were suppressed, he still didn't appear. Finally, 2 utmost beings of the primordial era appeared, and 2 more utmost beings of the primordial era arrived. A total of 4 utmost beings of the primordial era joined forces to fight against Ian, but the final result left all living beings in an uproar. The 4 utmost beings of the ancient times had all been suppressed by Ian, and had been defeated in an extremely miserable manner. In the entire Chaosverse, Ian reigned supreme. No one could defy his will. Fortunately, although Ian had swept through the primordial era and suppressed all living beings, he hadn't done anything excessive. After suppressing these people, the entire Chaosverse returned to normal. Ian hadn't established any utmost Taoist teachings, and no one knew where he was. The entire Chaosverse was terrifyingly calm, with no conflicts at all. Time passed bit by bit. The 12th Yuanhui had reached the middle stage. There were still 600 million years left before this Yuanhui came to an end. Chaosverse. 12th Yuanhui. There had never been a Yuanhui as peaceful as the 12th Yuanhui. It was so peaceful that even a stone falling into the water wouldn't cause the slightest ripple. However, behind this tranquility hid an unprecedented calamity. Once the 12th Yuanhui came to an end, it would erupt in an instant. The northernmost glacier. Yi Xian and Abyss sat cross-legged across from each other. Both of them radiated their Daos and laws, and at that moment, they merged with each other. The dazzling brilliance was extraordinarily dazzling, containing extreme terror. 100 million years passed. Yi Xian and Abyss exchanged their insights. With their Daos and laws complementing each other, both of them made great progress. But what made their hearts heavy was that they hadn't found the opportunity to break through to the eternal realm. This made them very anxious. Buzz, an ancient bronze scripture, a 3-meter-long halberd, and a small cauldron revolved in front of the two of them. Rays of mysterious and unfathomable light suddenly appeared, causing Yi Xian and Yuan to seem illusory and indeterminate. Damn it! Abruptly, Abyss let out a low roar, causing the two of them to stop their cultivation abruptly. Calm your mind. Yi Xian opened his eyes and said in a cold voice. It's been 100 million years, but this cauldron hasn't changed at all. Are you sure it can help us enter the eternal realm? Abyss said impatiently. It was no wonder Abyss was so anxious. After all, the 12th Yuanhui was already halfway through. There were still more than 600 million years before the calamity arrived. If he and Yi Xian couldn't enter the eternal realm, the chaos verse of this era would be destroyed when the calamity arrived. It would fall into the cycle of reincarnation again. If it were in the past, Abyss wouldn't be so anxious. At worst, he could wait for the new chaos verse to open. He would still be immortal. But somehow, Abyss felt that the chaos verse of this era was different from the past. It was likely that the most terrifying calamity would appear. Even if he and Yi Xian were half-step eternal realm, they might not be able to survive. This feeling was so strong that Abyss believed it without a doubt. The appearance of Ian and the changes of the eternal universe all indicated that this era was about to usher in the final calamity. Don't worry, the last cauldron is about to be broken by you and me. We'll know when the time comes, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Phew! Abyss exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and calmed himself down again. The two of them continued to comprehend the opportunity in the cauldron. The last cauldron was sealed with mysterious patterns. Its powerful sealing power took Yi Xian and Abyss 100 million years to break through even if they worked together. Fortunately, with their powerful cultivation, they were already at the final stage of breaking through. It wouldn't take long for them to break the seal. 3 years later, buzz! A dazzling brilliance burst out from the cauldron, and an extremely miraculous thing happened. The last cauldron turned into a beam of light and merged with the ancient bronze scripture. The scripture pages fluttered without wind. There were a total of 12 cauldrons engraved on the scripture pages. At this moment, they erupted with an aura that made Yi Xian and Abyss hearts palpitate. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. As it's the primary source of revenue, that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.